what could mean only one thing, ladies and gentlemen. BoomBastic's Super Duper HoRRoRWEEN Special 2023 coming to y'all. We're starting off with three folks, making it beautiful. I got Ape It over to my right. Ape It, how you doing over there, boy?
Yeah, I'm here to have some fun. I'm a real party animal. Yeah.
He's a real good guy. He's a real good guy. And right underneath him, we have an imposter. Somebody dressed up as the great William Coyne, maybe an alien of some sort. Who knows these things? Or is that Billy Coyne himself? Very good, very good. Fresh from
Uranus.
and well, don't tell the folks that. That's not good. That's not good. Fresh from one-man panel in Monster Expo and doing it big. And fresh from the set. Let me wipe the blood out of my eyes. Fresh from the set.
Absolutely, dude.
The Wicked Hollow situation. Very nice new film in the works, starring the great Alexander Hauck. He's around here somewhere. Ethan Rogers, Christopher J. Long, Henry Columbert, and introducing Mike Sessadine. But it's great stuff. You know, we're hard at work on the new feature-length film. You know what I mean? On the South Shores of Massachusetts. We got Billy Coyne over here doing special effects. You know, very fantastic stuff. Recently just had the great Billy Whedon, you know, from Sergeant Kabuki Man, NYPD, Psycho Ape, Once and Future Smash. You know what I mean? Upcoming Psycho Ape 2. Ape It, big fan. His favorite movie, Psycho Ape.
Big fan. Love Psycho Ape. It just reminds me of a family get-together.
Addison and Greggy over there doing it big now, doing it big. With Bill Weeds, we also had Insane Shane McCain, HoRRoRWEEN guest from the past. Let me check. Let me get decent. HoRRoRWEEN guests from the past, ladies and gentlemen. You know what I mean? And it goes on, and more fun's had, and more fun's had. You know what I mean? But I'm just a crazy man in delirium.
Well, what can we say? The Halloween, the HoRRoRWEEN atmosphere just brings out the animal in all of us.
It does. You know, Billy's been he's been on this. You've pretty much been to every HoRRoRWEEN thus far, I believe, Billy Coyne, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
So we don't need to get into the crazy madness of all your favorite movies and such. I should stop kicking this table, though. That would be beautiful. I'd even, make myself happy. Shout out to Buddy Buttafuoco behind the boards, director extraordinaire on this HoRRoRWEEN. Very glamorous, very glamorous.
Buddy.
Maybe Buddy will pop in at some point and show his face. It'll be fantastic. You know what I mean? So one of the things we want to get into today is a new thing we want to do with the HoRRoRWEEN special each year is we want to recommend a nice horror film for folks out there. You know what I mean? And what better way than to have somebody involved with the project itself on it, you know? And what better show than the HoRRoRWEEN 2023 edition? So we're going to do that for folks today. Now, in 1986, a little film came out. No stranger, we're no stranger to some bad times making a film. Perhaps some people would say that's what I can see with my good eye and my bloody eye. You know, I think any independent filmmaker out there who's ever picked up a camera that weighed more than the bag of money that was supposed to make the movie can tell you, shit, there's some serious problems you might run into, might find yourself swimming around in. You know what I mean? And Spookies is definitely a film that fits into that category, but a film that I think all horror fans just kind of love for that and for other reasons. You know what I mean? But it had a rocky, turbulent little come into, which we'll probably get into. We have the great Frank Farel joining us in a little bit. But you guys remember when Spookies came into your life?
I do. Spookies came into my life very early on because the cover of the VHS is something that has always stuck out in my mind. It's a beautiful piece of artwork, and I actually have right in front of me a framed original theatrical poster. But when it comes to the viewing experience, I really didn't discover it until, I believe, when Vinegar Syndrome put out the Blu-ray, which is a beautiful disc. And I am definitely someone who is a fan of their product uh, from Vinegar Syndrome. But the movie itself, there are two amazing documentaries, which I would looking forward to talking to Frank about. One is they call the Unmaking of Spookies, which is amazing, learning about how this production was kind of married with another project, and it's some turmoil unfortunately was going on in the other documentaries about the executive producer Michael Lee, who definitely, I should say, he didn't make things easy during the making of the movie, but he's a very fascinating guy. Both documentaries are phenomenal. His is called the Vipco Story, which is a pretty big company back in the day, if you remember Vipco.
Yeah, I'd like to see that one sheet, because what a great artwork. You know what I mean?
Oh, it's beautiful. I'll definitely pull it in when Frank gets in here. I think we'll get a kick out of it.
He'll appreciate it. Alex, or Ape It. Alex ain't here. He's away on set shooting the Wicked Hollows. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Ape It, how you doing over there, bub?
Okay, I mean, going with what Billy said, I mean, the artwork is definitely one of the things that drew me into picking up a copy to watch. And one of the things I remember, and I think it's the case with a lot of us that grew up in the 80s that, picked up films like Spookies and so forth and so on. The art, the cover art on a lot of the VHSs are what really drew us into picking up these films and watching them for the first time. And I really think that it's one of the missed things nowadays, because I mean, when you go and pick up like a lot of DVDs and like standard stuff now, that they don't quite create, as cool posters or as artwork that they used back in the 80s. I mean, what do you think?
I agree with that. You see a lot of homage type stuff that looks pretty good, but it's interesting because even when they're doing the homage stuff, it doesn't quite full. It's good, but it's not quite fully. There was something about that time and era that can't really be. Some people are good, can redo it nicely, but for the most part, you see a lot of pale in comparison type situations.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that it's actually, I think it's a lost art form. I mean, you go and I think one of the funniest things is when you go down, especially back in the day when you would go down to Blockbuster or Video Island or any of those small rental stores, and you go in and you see all these different VHSs out there to be picked up. And of course, you're looking at and what gets your eye first is, of course, the cover art.
Yeah,
then, you pick it up and then you take it home. And of course, what I always find hilarious, which was one of the things I actually kind of enjoyed, was that you look at the cover art and it looks really cool. Mm-hmm. And then when you actually watch the movie, it's not quite as cool as the cover art. So, you're kind of like, huh, that's interesting. Sometimes the cover art is like the best part of the movie.
But there's a reason for that, because some of these movies that were very low budget, and even the filmmakers knew if they had a kick-ass piece of art, then that basically can help provide some form of credibility to the shelf life and integrity. Because if you can make a really cool piece of art, and actually as an exclusive, just for this, who would be interested in seeing a piece of artwork that I'm making for the Wicked Hollows?
I want to see it. I want to see it. Nice. I like it.
There you go.
Yep, it's a little piece of promo artwork that I've been creating off and on for the Wicked Hollows.
Yeah. Well, I like that. I thought that was something else. I almost wouldn't have shown that. But
But you have to actually watch this in order to get the
you
exclusive.
gotta see it. You gotta see it. I was hoping for intestines. But
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, you know, you might or you might not see a little bit of something, a little flavor in this episode about what we're doing and what we're doing on the weekends.
flavor
A lot of flavor, a lot of fun.
and fire.
Fire.
Some bloods, you know what I mean? Some stuff like that. So Alex, I don't know. There is no Alex here. 8-Bit.
Yeah.
What's Alex been doing with himself? You know?
Well, when
You're
last
a
time
big
I
fan,
talked to Alex, he was talking to me about last weekend being on set on the Wicked Hollows,
Yeah.
working with a great group of guys, being directed by the one and only Mr. Matthew Fisher,
Oh, that's cool.
and the great
Stuff.
Billy Coyne there for special effects and sound. Very important and a lot of fun. The best crew you can ever get anywhere in New England or anywhere else.
There you have it. Has Alex been jumping around doing any other big films that we should be looking out for? Since, you know, anybody that just tunes in for HoRRoRWEEN yearly might want to know what's going on. And he ain't
I'm
too big wigging. He's too much of a big shot to come to the show anymore, you know.
Yeah, well, what can
Funny
you say? Alex is a little bit full of himself.
Who?
Unlike me, I like to hang out with my buddies and talk shop. That's why I'm here for HoRRoRWEEN. But
When we're filming, we have to open the bay doors just so Alex Hawk's ego can fit inside of the place.
yeah, well,
You're gonna get
sometimes
an
his
air
head is
rotation.
within his belly, and that's quite a feat within itself.
You got to have at least a couple windows down when Alex's ego is in the building, because if the windows are up, you could die from it. You could die inhaling all that, you know, exhaust ego smoke. Whew.
I was talking to him, and he said that he has a few things coming out on Halloween itself. Anyone who likes vampires and vampire hunters and good old fashioned, you know, Western style, fighting and all that. That's Bloodthirst coming out on Halloween through Lionsgate.
On HoRRoRWEEN itself.
On HoRRoRWEEN itself.
Just right now, it's out.
Yeah, it is. It is right now. Just go to Amazon and order your copy right now. You'll get to see Alex as a asshole militiaman that is part of a ragtag group of militia that thinks that they own the wasteland. Well, the truth is the vampires are the ones that own the wasteland.
I got a bloodthirst to see that movie.
Me too.
Heck yeah.
Hell yeah.
And he's also in a few other things. There's a slasher film that's going to be coming out. Actually, just came out last month. Dr. Gift has a small role in that. Macabre Mountain. He has another small role in that. That just premiered last weekend. And there's another one, Bermuda Triangle Project, which is going to be released, I think, next week, like next Monday or something.
If it doesn't get lost in the Bermuda Triangle on the way. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have our guest of the evening, first guest of the evening, I believe. We'll see. Popping in for HoRRoRWEEN 2023 from the set of Spookies, the great Frank Farel. Welcome to the show. Frank, welcome to the show.
Hey there, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, great to meet you. Frank's been on the BoomBastic's show before, and we wanted to have him back for our big HoRRoRWEEN special to talk about one of the films that he was a part of that we love so much. Spookies, my God. You know, Bill was just talking about it a few seconds ago. He pulled up his poster, which is nice. I like it.
It's an original. I'm sorry for the framing of this thing, but yeah.
It almost looks exactly like the one I have framed in the same frame.
That actually is the one. Billy stole it. Nice.
Nice. Love that artwork. Classic.
Actually, Frank, who did the artwork for your poster?
Oh, you don't know?
I do know. His name escapes me because he's a very recognized artist. I just
It's Richard Corbin.
yeah, Richard Corbin. I mean,
going back to like when I was a young teenager, he was really one of my favorite comics artists. He started out in the underground comics,
okay.
And then working for Warren Publications, doing like creepy and eerie and things like that. And he only did 3 movie posters, one of which is Spookies. The other 2 are Heavy Metal and The Phantom of the Paradise.
Good company.
Right. Yeah. It's bizarre because I just think he's a fantastic artist. He would have seemed natural to do dozens of movie posters.
Yeah. Maybe he didn't quite like it, like that side of it.
I don't know. I mean, I know, he became more and more recognized almost with every year. So and actually I was surprised his doing the one sheet artwork for Spookies was after, I guess you're sort of somewhat aware of the debacle that we had with the background and all that. But that was one of the things that shocked me, that how did he get Richard Corbin? This is probably the same person I would have wanted to get.
Yeah.
I mean, the only other person that really pops in my head that to do beautiful artwork was Lee McLeod with all of those Charlie Band movies from the 80s and 90s, because sometimes those movies, the artwork, it's amazing how
traditionally on horror and exploitation and science fiction, the posters are almost designed to be better than the movie. Like they'll be packed with stuff that couldn't possibly be in a movie this cheap or whatever.
And we were talking about that, of how they would take maybe like a few key scenes maybe from a movie and almost do like a slight mosaic
but I mean, look, that's exactly what they're still doing right now. If you look at similar types of movies and what their poster artwork is like. I mean, I think that's I've always felt that's part of it, was not so much with horror or science fiction specifically, but with sort of low budget genres that maybe are a little bit out of the mainstream, and they need sensationalism to sell them. So it's like, I think this is one of the reasons a lot of horror fans are into things like circus sideshows and freaks and things like this, because there's this sensationalism. It's like, oh, I'm seeing something I'm not supposed to, or nobody else knows about this, or whatever it is. So I think that's always gone hand in hand. So the posters usually oversell. In fact, when I see a poster that seems kind of like laid back, I'm very suspicious of that.
Yeah, I mean, the artwork is so huge, I collect VHS, and it's like you could have the movie really in any format nowadays, you know what I mean? But it's like you want that kind of old, as pristine as can be VHS cover. It's just, there's something about, we got into a conversation a while back about like how the DVD's got the physical cut. There's just something about it being printed right there on the box, as opposed
I realize that's why I mean, VHS has retained its popularity with collectors, and in general right now the collectors are keeping the the DVD and Blu-ray market alive. They're the ones who will spend extra to get something different, or to get something more than what they had before, or whatever.
And now there's these boutique labels, almost like Vinegar Syndrome, which did a beautiful job with the movie, and some other companies that are really starting to showcase exploitation.
I think, I mean, they're the bigger, there's Vinegar Syndrome and a few others here and in Europe, but they've continued to do strong business, and there are lots of other little pop-up labels that almost seem to come out to release 1 or 2 films, and then that's it.
And I mean, the one thing I love about Spookies is the cast. It's just, so...
That's not a compliment. That's not a compliment that the movie gets frequently.
No, but the thing is, I mean, I understand how a lot of these people, like, you wouldn't think they would be friends because, the age range and, some of the, how the, like, you might have someone who looks
well,
like...
in our original cut, there was, there were a few lines of dialogue sort of telling you why this older guy might be hanging out with these other people. Plus, keep in mind, initially we were ordered to do a film with teenagers, right? And to tell the truth, I know this is a popular trope of horror movies, man, but I never wanted to see a movie because the main characters were teenagers. That never occurred to me as a film goer, you know, no matter what age I was at. But we basically just went ahead and did what we wanted in terms of what we did with the characters, etc. And you know, most of the actual actors are in their 20s. I think a couple of them are in their 30s.
That's kind of the way it is, though. You know, we're currently doing a film right now, and we had some issues in the beginning, you know, because originally it was supposed to be teenagers, and
right,
just like finding some good teenagers that cared and had the talent was kind of like a difficult thing.
It's harder to find good young actors than slightly older people who've had a little bit of experience.
Yeah, you think about all like the old 80s movies that we really love. It's like it's always like 30-year-old people playing 18-year-olds and stuff like that.
Well, it's that, but also understand that was, you know, a few movies are successful, you know, between Halloween and Friday the 13th, and I'm very critical of distributors from the beginning of movies until now, just about. Right. They're almost all crass businessmen. Yeah. They don't really quite get, in many cases, why they're selling something that's really popular with certain people. They just know they're making money.
Yeah, it's well, they're the business, and then there's the creative side of things. You know what I mean?
Right, and you can do both. I mean, I've had to learn and deal with, you know, a good deal of business in my time, and I think you need to have a sense of all aspects of things. But I would say distributors are not in it because of their love of the art.
Right, right.
I agree with you. I mean, it is frustrating when you're trying to get your movie out there and you discover the unscrupulousness of, you know, some folks.
Well, right now it's weird because it's like a double-edged situation. It's easier and cheaper to make a movie than ever before.
Absolutely.
And thousands of people, and probably I'd say maybe the majority of them are horror fans making their first feature film and getting distribution, because there are dozens of distributors out there who'd be happy to take your film and find some artwork for it and sell it wherever they can. Whether you ever see any of that is an entirely different story. The chances are that no, you will not.
Not so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad because I mean, probably, you know, if you look at something like that, I mean, most of those films are not going to be great films. There are a few that might, you know, be here and there that are really done by talented people and that really have something special to offer. But the distributors are taking advantage of these people like never before. They essentially, they offer contracts that if you read them closely, you realize, all right, this guarantees no money to us no matter what happens.
Yeah. I think, you know, as a filmmaker, I think that, you know, getting the film in stores, you know, to go with the whole thing about like distribution, it's like that was really the goal, like, you know, not getting money. Like,
well, that's still in terms of a lot of movies, and especially of low budget filmmakers, it's a big deal to get your film actually into a store on a shelf, because that's a much more limited market, right? But I mean, I know people who have like regular distribution through you know, like Walmart or other chains, and their films do get out there and on shelves, and I don't think they make the majority of sales there,
right?
But it just having it visible is a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, a buddy of ours has, you know, I think with Walmart, James Balsamo,
right?
And that's who I'm actually thinking of. It's one of the people I'm thinking of.
Yeah, because I know he has, you know, like, but you know, I think as a collector, we definitely value the, you know, the 3D tangible nature of actually, you know, owning it and, you know, working with it.
I mean, for me, you got to realize that to me, I don't have the same excitement and the main reason is because when I grew up and first got into film, I started collecting films on 8mm, 16mm. So to me, the tangible thing is having a print of the film in your hand that you can like actually like hold up to the light and see the images on. To me, that's like the physical object. The packaging, I don't have as much of an attachment to.
Well, and it's funny because speaking of packaging, another film you're affiliated with where I think the artwork is absolutely stunning is Street Trash.
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% sure who actually did that artwork, but I've seen all the different iterations.
I forget the guy's name. I should tell you that my friend Jamie Cimino, who runs the Street Trash page on Facebook and is I would say is the most enthusiastic Street Trash fan that I've ever known, is actually writing a book on the making of it.
Oh, yeah.
And It will be interviewing as many people as possible, lots of pictures and information nobody has seen before. And there's so many, there's like, really tons of great little anecdotes and backstories and facts, all kinds of stuff that really never has been talked about that much. And I'm looking forward to that. I think he's going to have something very, very good.
What was the reception like with the whole 42nd Street in New York with the release of that movie? Because I mean,
Right.
the pictures, it's very cool.
This is embarrassing to admit, but I don't even know if Street Trash ever played on 42nd Street or Times Square. Right now, bear in mind, I grew up that I lived outside of New York City, north of New York City, and as soon as I was old enough for my parents to give me permission, I started like going to the city every weekend to watch, to go to time. I didn't tell them where I was going, but I was going to Times Square, 42nd Street, in the middle of the red light district, and I was seeing as many movies as I could see in however many hours that I had. And in those days, it was great because, I mean, there was just like 8 or 9, or I forget exactly how many were just on one block of 42nd Street with double and triple bills. And I mean, I remember prices as low as 75 cents admission.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was cheap at the time. So,
yeah. I mean, it's just amazing hearing the history of, those grindhouse movies from people like Frank Henenlotter and Bill Lustig talking about their infinity, with those, with that location, discovering all those great old movies.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was the only place, a lot of stuff, it was literally the only place you were likely to see these movies at all. I mean, they were the equivalent of the drive-ins in other parts of the country. Yeah. And, essentially this is what these, a lot of these films were designed to do, to play these kind of situations. And, in a lot of cases, they'd strike off a limited number of prints and they'd just keep transporting them all over the country until they fell apart. And I saw a lot of those prints.
Yeah. Well, after seeing the print, I think that's why you definitely like the film. Like you were saying, we might be getting down more with box art. It might be our like little deal, but holding up the film in the light and being able to see it, like, cause I don't know about these other gentlemen, but I would love to. I own some like 35mm trailers. I have like a box of them now that I like to look at. You know what I mean? But yeah, I definitely feel you on that.
I mean, I have friends who are still collecting 16, and some of them are even collecting 35. And 35 is probably a lot more easier to obtain these days because nobody's showing it.
Yeah.
I noticed on eBay, you can actually get a decent price now for 16mm compared to, say, like trying to obtain a 35mm.
No, I mean, for a long time, the reason I became a film collector like so many other people is there was no other than seeing a movie on television in its original theatrical run, or maybe at a museum or something, or a revival theater. There was no way to see most of these. I remember watching so many films, years ago, back in say the 70s, even the 80s, that I'd be sitting there thinking, wow, I have to remember this because I'll probably never see it again.
Yeah.
And there's that whole almost like preservation, mentality that comes in, when you start collecting, because you really value what you have, and you just really
exactly. Well, it's become like, I've always been a big fan of film preservation, in terms of I think all films from all times should be preserved no matter what they are. They're just important historically, and I watch old films, and I mean old films from every decade, from the beginning of film until now. Because I learn stuff all the time. I frequently see stuff done, decades before anybody would think, certain techniques were used or something. And I've seen things, many times I go, wow, this is like this is not like well known, but this thing I'm looking at here is like kind of totally innovative for that year, or what, you would expect from those people. And I like that. I like that sense of like discovery and of knowing that there was a lot more going on than general information would allow you to know.
And I think it's wonderful how you have people.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, especially now, since so much stuff has gone on streaming, and I know that they were talking about in Best Buy how they're going to be stop carrying their DVDs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That I think it's a big thing for anyone who's a film lover to buy as much, especially the stuff that's out of print. Try to get. Because I think, honestly, it's our job to try to preserve these things, because a lot of people, who who are in charge that they look at these films and they think of it, well, no one's going to want to watch this, 30 years. They like you said, look for the money in it. And the fact is, there's so much great creativity and great stuff out there that needs to be, saved and preserved and, tangible. Whether it's 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter, or whether it's
in many cases, you just have to take it how you can get it because that's all there is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like movies that Matt have that's on VHS you'll never find on
Can't
DVD
even get them anymore.
or anywhere else. I mean, and the fact is that as with streaming trying to take over, I mean,
well, streaming has taken over. There's no question.
Yeah, I mean, all they have to do is just decide one day, well, not enough people are watching Spooky, so we'll just take this off, and then you'll never see it again. That's why.
Well, at the moment, it doesn't work like that because a lot of these places will just keep putting stuff up. They're especially like Tubi or some of these, basically free sites. I mean, they're putting up all kinds of stuff that a lot of which can't have that much of a following, but whatever they're paying versus whatever they may be making in terms of ad revenues, ultimately, I guess the transaction works for them, and I think that's good actually. I actually saw a guy, I think it may have been on my page, somebody responding to some post I made or something, and somebody complaining that all the streaming companies were now wiping out their libraries, so you couldn't get the movies anymore from that service or this service. And all I could think was, well, first of all, they keep trading movies and titles all the time. Nobody, unless they actually own all rights, they're not going to have it forever. Beyond which, what makes you think streaming is like some kind of an actual, like medium where things are preserved? It's not.
Yeah.
You've got to have some physical form for things to be technically preserved.
Yeah, and it sounds like from when I'm reading about preservation of these films, it sounds if you have, I guess, the 35 millimeter negative, then and you hold on to that, then it's amazing what you can do.
The 35 millimeter negative of Spookies was what they used for the our Blu-ray release, and it looks better on Blu-ray than I remember it ever looking in its original release, just on a regular 35 millimeter print. It looks it looks rich and clean.
Yeah, it does. And I remember with preservation, one person who was a big proponent and actually was talking, Joe Dante. Almost like if you can take your movie and you can put it on VHS, then that way you have a master of it. And you can kind of do what you want, I guess, as you will. But no matter what, that if they have those negatives, but if you don't have them, then the work print, it's like, I mean, how good does that look? Because you never know how they're going to be formatting this stuff, for disc.
Film, getting the reels of film is something I always would love to have collected those, but I used to go on eBay every now and then and look them up, and they'd be like, for like $500, $600, $700, you could probably get like, I remember Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 was floating around for a while. Mm-hmm. There's you got to worry about like they turn red or something like that, or yellow or something.
If they're done on like certain kinds of film stock, like especially the Eastman Kodak stocks that were being used for a long time, they tend to, after a certain amount of time, just go pink, red, more, I mean, sometimes seriously red. But that was, I mean, the only stable color process was the old Technicolor process that they pretty much stopped using in the 60s.
Yeah. And then there were other companies like Deluxe, I think they came in a little later. And
I mean, when I worked in New York City, there were like 5 or 6 labs, many different film companies making their own stock. I mean, like the ideal thing to use was Kodak film, though. If you wanted to buy like Fuji film or a couple of other brands that were available, you could get a better price. You might not get quite the color spectrum that you wanted.
Wasn't the news shot on film back in the day?
Oh, well, for a long time, yeah. I mean, if they went out and did like something on the street or interviewed anything that was not in the studio was shot on 16 millimeter film usually.
Yeah.
Okay.
With George Romero, I believe got his start doing like the news, shooting his news.
Yeah, I mean, in his early career, he was making anything he could, commercials and industrial documentaries. And I recently saw the film he did called
Oh, the
gosh,
amusement park.
Amusement Park, yeah, which is
Yeah.
about the horrors of old age, really, more than anything
Is
else.
that what it is? I gotta check. It's super cheap on Amazon. I've been meaning to grab it.
You know, you got to realize that he was making a film, you know, for people who wanted a certain type of film, you know, and I thought, you know, he did something creative with the premise. It's you know, but it's also a typical industrial film of that time, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
meaning it's kind of like dated in terms of the way it's trying to tell its
Style.
story and give its message, and it's you know, but it feels like any cheap film of that time. It's, you know, grainy 16 millimeter and all the other trademarks.
That's that kid. That might that you know. I assume that's what it was. There's probably a reason why we didn't see it for a while. And like to go into the artwork stuff, like the artwork that they made for for like what's out now with like it's the dude's face with like the middles, like the fucking the roundabout thing. What do you call that with the horses? Merry-go-round. So it's like
Right.
the great artwork. Like that artwork is what pulls you in. So to go case in point on that artwork talk, you know. But it was good. You liked it? I gotta check it out.
Yeah.
For what
Yeah.
it was, yeah.
And he also shot Fred Rogers' colonoscopy.
Oh yeah, you like that?
I thought that was rather interesting when I found out Romero actually documented that.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
I mean, no, but I'm fascinated by, you know, Romero because, you know, as a filmmaker and especially in his young career starting, and I believe he did something with Fred Rogers. It was like a medical thing. And
Actually, that I'd heard, but I didn't know it was his colonoscopy.
I think I heard colonoscopy.
Oh, well, he's not afraid to go where most men don't want to go.
No, he wasn't. And you know, I mean, George, as you may know, I'm a zombie in Dawn, and
I didn't know that. Very cool.
yeah, I'm the seltzer zombie. I get when the motorcycle gang breaks into the mall towards the end. Tom Savini and his gang come in, and Savini sprays me in the face with a bottle of seltzer.
Okay, that's yeah. I'm an alumni of Savini's actually, and you know, at orientation, he loved showing the video of that, you know, seltzer footage. So you're actually at the orient.
Yeah. Well, that was amazing because I went down there with one of my Spookies partners, and we were just like, you know, wow, a chance to be in the sequel to Night of the Living Dead, because Night of the Living Dead was just a very iconic horror film for me in the years preceding that, and it was just it was a blast. The scenes we shot were totally like unscripted, and it was just, you know, George had some time and money and wanted to fool around and play with some ideas. And that whole scene was, he was, as we were shooting, he's saying, I don't know if this is going to wind up in the picture. It did.
So you know, you and your partner just like nowadays we could like if you know if the great George was still with us, you know what I mean? Like you can't just make it called the set, but you hear like other filmmakers have done that in the past, you know, when it was more like easy to get into those things. Now, who would you like contact? Was it like his production company and just said we want to come in?
At the time, we heard that they were shooting at this mall.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how we got the production office number. What we did, we said, "Oh well, you know, we'd like to come and be zombies." Oh well, come on, we need zombies.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is when the concept of the mall was, I don't know if it was fairly new because I know they had some built, or maybe it was the fact that it was abandoned that kind of gave.
No, it wasn't a band. I mean, it was a fairly
okay.
Mall, and malls at the time were still a big deal, not like now where most malls have closed down.
Yeah.
But I mean, at that time, I mean, to be able to go to one building and have like all these stores and all this merchandise, that was still an exciting thing. And he, you know, and bear in mind too that the film was still, you know, technically a low budget film. And he, you know, he had a lot of stuff, you know, he said, well, you know, I wish I had, you know, the budget to do certain things. And I said, like, what? We said, well, you know, I'd like to just be able to like drive a motorcycle through that store window over there and things like that. And I can understand that because you can't, you know, there was like a certain distance he could go. But if you look at that scene, like anything that's destroyed is something that was built just for the film.
True.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Savini was probably had his hand up saying, hey, can it be me who does that? Because he loved doing, you know, some of the stuff.
I was there. I was there when he did the stunt when he gets knocked off the balcony.
It falls in the boxes and he misses or hurt or whatever.
Oh, you've heard this?
I've heard something. Yeah.
Yeah, he came down and he landed like half off the boxes. And it wasn't, it was like maybe a 25, 30-foot drop, if I remember.
No, yeah.
But it's not the kind of thing you want to find that you don't have the cushioning there when you fall.
Yeah.
And that could have been, if he had just like, been over a little bit more, he could have been seriously injured, it would seem. So, it was exciting.
No, it's funny. As an alumni, of his program, I'd see him at conventions over the years. One of the more recent conventions, my arm dislocated. And Tom is the only person I would trust to actually pop my arm back in the socket.
Oh, I've had that happen to me 3 times.
That's what I did.
At least does,
it happened to me, and then I went in for the rotator cuff surgery. And
the first time it happened, I went to a doctor and had to have it fixed. And just for popping it back in, I got charged some ridiculous fee, right? The next time it happened, a friend of mine, I said, look, just pull my arm, and they got it back in. The third time it happened, nobody was around. So eventually I just had to grab a doorknob and use that to get it back in.
And it pops right in?
It doesn't feel good when you dislocate a limb.
It's very disorienting.
It is.
Oh dang. Bill is the master of pulling out his arm for sure. I know that for facts.
I've made plenty of body parts over the years. The last thing I want to do is basically recycle my own.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, the thing is also, I mean, injuries happen in all kinds of ways. I've gotten mine. I have movie related injuries, and I'm sure most people who have done any physical stuff,
stunt work or whatever. I mean,
I mean,
even as a producer, I remember I banged my head on a set and then just like,
yeah. And the thing is, you don't even have to be a stuntman. If you just regularly do stuff that involves physical action, you're going to get hurt all the time because there's just no way to avoid it. I mean, you can avoid a great deal of stuff, but accidents happen.
Yeah. Well, what we're filming right now, there's one spot where we put some of our equipment, and inevitably there's a low beam as soon as you come up, and everyone has smacked their head on this thing.
We'll have to talk to the executive producer about
that. That's another thing too. It's like when you have a small budget, you have to put up with stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you have a large budget, you just say, all right, take this away or rebuild this or do whatever. We don't want to hit our heads anymore.
Cut it out, cut a notch out.
And it's nice because if you have a little more budget, then you can be in a little more control in certain environments.
But I've always felt that, like, I mean, a huge budget, and the huger the budget, it's not even so much there for what gets on the screen. A lot of it is there simply for cushioning, for less stress for everyone involved, more comfort. Everything's easier to do. There's always enough help. There's always enough assistance. Whereas on Spookies, even though we had a reasonable budget for the time in terms of a really low budget film, but it was only still, we spent about $250,000. So
that's a gorgeous piece of property that you filmed on as well.
Oh yeah. We were lucky to get it. It was very local. It was only about like 2 miles from where I lived at the time in Westchester.
Go along with the close location.
Well, you can't, and the fact is also that that whole area is full of like old houses. So I mean, we were looking, we knew we'd find something in the area, but we found something closer that was good for myself and my 2 partners. And once we got past the negotiation for the use of the space, because we had a lot of obstacles in our way, including the town, who thought we would damage a historical site, which it was, although it wasn't officially declared a national historical landmark until after we shot there. And I think the fact that there was controversy about us possibly shooting there sort of helped that to happen.
And I think I remember correctly on the documentary that you talk about some haunting and some bizarre situations that happened.
Some of the people there have claimed that they had incidents with ghosts or weird things happening, etc. And I've heard these stories. I mean, I don't know what to say. I'm somewhat skeptical about some of these stories.
But you didn't experience any of that yourself,
I have yet to have a supernatural or bizarre experience of any sort, and I'm waiting. I want it to happen. Mm-hmm. It's like I want the universe to send me something that will totally freak the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
But it hasn't. I mean, I don't know if I'll be that lucky. And again, I also wonder it's the kind of thing where I wonder now, because some of these stories that I've heard recently, one of them coming from one of my partners, Brendan Faulkner, on the film, where he's talking about ghosts and this and that, and I don't remember anybody telling these stories at the time we were making the film.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, because I think it was one of the Muckmen himself, an effects artist, an old buddy, Gabe Bertalos.
Yeah.
I think Gabe actually said, like, I thought I heard some woman screaming, I'm over here doing.
No, Dave, I mean, Gabe's, and I've only heard this from Brendan. I've never actually asked Gabe about this, but he supposedly, as when we were just getting, I think it was within the first few weeks we were on the property, that he went upstairs and then he comes down, he says, "Who's that woman upstairs?" And they said, "What woman?" And apparently he saw some woman upstairs that wasn't upstairs.
Yeah.
But I haven't asked Gabe about it.
It's high energy. It's the energy, you know what I mean?
Well, it could be almost anything. I mean, any old, if there are ghosts, any house that old, a couple of 100 years old, is going to have ghosts.
Yeah.
And I think some people want to believe, and sometimes I think.
See, my attitude about all these things, about all the paranormal, is I'm totally a fan, and I'm like totally interested, and I would love, one or two of these things to be so, absolutely confirmed that there was no question. But my rational mind also says, well, none of this stuff that a lot of people believe devoutly in has necessarily been proven. It's like, I mean, you can point to this and this and say, oh, this is evidence, but there's a lot. If these things, if certain things were proven beyond a doubt, we wouldn't be talking about them as if we didn't know whether they existed.
Yeah, it's like the X-Files. I want to believe.
But I think that's a big part of it. And yeah, of course, yeah, I would love to believe all these amazing, weird, interesting things are going on, and I would love to be, surrounded by them and whatever. I don't think if I actually met a ghost, I might initially be shocked because I don't usually meet them, but I don't think I'd be afraid of a ghost. Well, what the fuck is a ghost going to do to me?
Exactly.
I don't believe ghosts are doing things to people.
And that's what's fun about the medium of film. Is to play with even those concepts, like all the Bigfoot movies that there are, and just to create something that you haven't seen before. And that's what's wonderful about telling fantastic stories, where here's something, let's put something out there people believe to a certain aspect, and let's make it entertaining.
Right. And my attitude is like, I don't take the attitude of like, oh, well, I'm a complete disbeliever. I have, no, belief in any of this stuff. I'm like, as I said, I'm open-minded. I have no idea what may or may not be the case. I know where most evidence will point in certain cases and say, oh, this is unlikely or, improbable or whatever, but I'm totally open-minded.
Yeah. I think another question I have about Spookies, not to sound mean-spirited at all.
Please.
But it feels like Mike Lee did not make this production easy on you guys.
It seems. Have you seen the documentary?
I have. I'm just trying multiple times, but it's just
Mike Lee made it a torture chamber.
I mean, it's just how did you guys just endure?
Because we had so much passion for what we were doing.
Yeah,
and that. And it's the kind of thing where, I mean, and I've seen this happen in almost any situation where I've been involved, where there's, the creative people here and the financing or people with the ultimate power on another side. And there's always this kind of a back and forth conflict. The difference with Michael was that he was not very bright. He was not very kind or reasonable man. He was paranoid. He was crooked. He thought everyone worked and thought like him, which meant he kept, anytime anything happened, he says, "Oh, so you're gonna fuck me, huh?" It's like no matter what the actual circumstance was, he just like immediately said, "All right, you're doing this, and you're doing it deliberately."
I mean, it just amazes me the mentality of this man, because I also saw that other documentary, the Vipco thing on there.
Oh, the one that goes on forever?
It's a very long documentary. And, the thing is, here's a guy, and it seems like distributors back then of a certain nature, whether if you're, Vipco or even like maybe Charlie Band with the Empire days, maybe to like buy Castle, with X amount of dollars.
Right.
But, it's almost like they need to kind of like balance these productions out somehow and not spend the money I mean, it seems like the money back then that was being spent, was just going all over the place, and only a percentage was really going to you guys.
Well, you mean in terms of distribution and returns, or
no, no, just like how he would talk, like, oh yeah, like I would buy a car, and then I mean, talking about these extravagant and lavish things that Mike was doing.
I mean, we made, in terms of what the income was for us personally, making, writing, directing, producing Spookies,
Yeah.
we made so little money that it's embarrassing, and I rarely actually even mention the amount we were paid, because it just seems ridiculous.
We won't ruin your HoRRoRWEEN by having to bring that number up.
No, I mean,
well, that wouldn't ruin it, but it was just the kind of thing where what would happen is we'd have a budget, and every time you constantly revise the budget because you get different ideas on what you might have to spend, and usually, without fail, the cost goes up, and you have to figure out a way to make the same amount of money stretch as far. But I mean, the easiest thing for us to cut that didn't take away from the movie was like our salaries in many instances.
You guys are lucky that didn't happen. And I've heard stories, I think through Canon, where unfortunately, I think they cut like $1 million out of like Chainsaw 2 or something like that. So when it comes to
that, I hadn't heard. Okay.
But yeah, Canon cut a chunk of the budget, let's say, and Toby Hooper was not very happy. But
didn't they give Toby a lump sum to do Invaders from Mars? And
I think Golem and Globus tied him into a multi-picture deal, and I think it was Life Force, where I think it almost bankrupted the company because he spent so much on that.
They were at the time that they were producing movies like Golem, Globus, Canon, all that. I mean, you'd get like the big yearly issue of Variety that had all the big upcoming film ads in it, and they would have like 50 pages, full page ads for movies that they were supposedly making. Half of them might not get made at all, but it seemed impossible to think one company was turning out this much stuff.
Yeah,
it was impressive. There's no denying that, but it's a matter of how good is the product.
I mean, Canon and Golden Globus, a lot of that level of stuff around that time, that was a little more costly, bigger budgets than the really low budget stuff. They'd get name actors. They'd occasionally make a quality film, but they were essentially turning out grindhouse films.
Yeah, and I was fascinated hearing how, I think it was Graydon Clark talking about Michael Milken, basically kind of this junk bonds guy, working with the company. I mean, raising all these funds, for these movies. And I didn't realize that Trump pardoned him, I guess, while he was in office.
Yeah, well, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of those, like Canon, etc. I'm sure a lot of that financing was coming through sources like Wall Street people, and that there must have been an awful lot of money flowing them to announce so many productions.
Yeah, because sometimes I mean, you care about when you get the money, but sometimes you don't ask, how did you get the money? And it's
never ask where. You never ask where.
Well, but there's no reason to ask.
The problem is anything with big business where there are lots of dollars, especially millions of dollars and things like that involved, you just have to, just in the back of your head, even if you never bring it up, there's something crooked going on somewhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For sure, but you're doing your thing, so don't talk about it.
Whatever. I mean, I don't really care where the money is coming from if somebody wants to finance a film. Hopefully there aren't too many people who've died to give me the money for the film.
No, I hear you.
That's like Toby when he got in cahoots with like the mob. That's like that mob money gotta be.
That happens, and that's happened to like a number of filmmakers where they wind up like directly having to deal with these characters.
Yeah, I mean, the whole video market was really shook up. It seems like, even like with the original Chainsaw, Bryanson House. It sounds like I think it was Bob Burns said those guys are mafias, straight up front.
No, but that's the thing. The mafia has always been involved with that end of filmmaking, pornography, definitely.
Oh yeah.
Sure. But it was just a small step over to doing horror and action movies and all this other stuff. And there was money to be made. I mean, with porn, it was a little different. It was like there wasn't as big an outlay of money, and the money came back very quickly instead of having to wait for it to get a legitimate release in many cases.
It's like people like this need to balance the books. So it's like, all right, let's give an investment here and it can be a write-off or something or whatever the actions were to just kind of shift money around.
I think it was a cool thing to do. I think making movies.
Let's just say I've had my own dealings with people connected to the mob, and to tell the truth, they've been like more or less pleasant. I mean, there was never any problem. I had much bigger problems with Michael Lee. He wasn't organized crime. He was just like would-be crime. He was
unorganized crime.
Unorganized crime. There you go. Does a mob figure care about the creative side of the film and all, or is it just a money thing?
I don't think so. And in many cases, depending, I would guess, on the situation, there's always been, like the mob likes to launder money, meaning they like to be able to like put it into something and then they might get some kind of a return out of whatever they put it into that's less than what they had, but they don't have to explain where the money came from at that point.
Yeah, because I think I heard it was through the credit lyonnaise in the Netherlands, I think in the late 80s, early 90s, or the credit lyonnaise, I think. But, people like, Lloyd Kaufman, Charlie Band. I mean, and it seems like with, even like the theaters, the studios, they have their theaters. And it seems like, when everything was starting to change from, the video market, there were so many different components.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Charlie Band was another one. There was a time during, during those same years that I mentioned in the 80s where you see like 30 new Charlie Band movies coming out. Yeah. These were like theatrical movies.
Yeah,
I just think ultimately at that time what had happened is the video boom hit really hard, and a lot of these films, even if they did no business in theaters or didn't even get into theaters, they knew they had guaranteed profitability on the video market because everything was making money on video at that time.
And even like it seems like when video was in its infancy, it had Charlie and Andrew Blay and a few others who really kind of built the home video kind of as we knew it, especially when because I think they even like from hearing stories, they even sold VCRs, I think, in some of these video stores back then.
Oh yeah. Well, VCRs and just the tapes themselves were at one time, like insanely expensive.
Big money, $130. I got like VHSs with $130 price tags on them.
Or sell through.
Yeah, I mean, like when Spookies came out in VHS, the sales price to stores was $79.
Yeah,
and they did very well with it, from what I know.
How many units were made?
It was I don't know after the initial run, but they initially had an order of like 30-something thousand units, which was considered, for a film of that sort at the time, which was considered a great sale. It seems to have shown up in almost every video store in the country, because that's where I hear so many people still telling me, oh, when I was a kid and I saw this in the video store and I had to see it. Or
the most famous. So I can't look at that.
Yeah. Look, you see, there's one of those 30,000 right there.
Yeah. And it's just, but, as the prices change, because it seems like in the 90s when I think sell-through really went through, then you can start.
They realized they could sell, yeah. I mean, at first it was just rental. Nobody really could afford to collect films quite like that. I mean, some people did. But, at a certain point, it really came down to the fact that, all right, they keep in mind that we're talking about these plastic cassettes with magnetic tape in them that cost really not very much to make. So there was an enormous profit factor with all that stuff.
Yeah. And hence the whole VHS rental world is spun from people not being able to just go buy it for their home use.
Right. And here, I don't know if you guys heard this, but supposedly Netflix is opening up stores.
Really?
And I don't know what kind of business model they're planning to run on. I don't know if they're just doing rentals or they're doing rentals and sales or.
Oh.
But at the same time, even though there are some people who might prefer that, I can't see how they can make a profit unless they're going to be doing something unexpected.
Yeah, because it seems like, not just Best Buy, but, like Newbury Comics, which we have up here, stopped with, Blu-ray and DVD and really cut back. And it's just, there's a sadness to it, because I think they're trying to make everything stream. But still, there are movies, where they don't have the copyright. And it's not like they can throw these movies up there, Like Tubi is amazing, has a great selection.
Well, Tubi is my favorite streaming service because it just has, I'm not looking for all the newest releases. In fact, I'm probably not interested Most of the newest releases.
Yeah.
Is Spookies actually streaming, or is it really only available
At the moment, I don't know where it might be streaming. I mean, it's been around. I actually heard it was on Tubi not too long ago, but it was on. It's first. It was first on Shudder, and Shudder then did. They did an issue, an episode of The Last Drive-In with with featuring Spookies, and and it's. I have to meet Joe Bob at some point because he's been.
I did an episode with him actually last season. I did the makeup for the Nosferatu Centennial episode.
Oh, okay.
And good people. John.
Yeah, no, I've become friendly. I mean, I was invited. I was a guest at the Mahoningville Drive-In. Are you familiar with that at all?
I am actually.
Which is like just like like it's like where people film buffs die and go there, in the afterlife or something because they were showing the night I was there. I mean, they show everything from VHS to 35 millimeter on their big screen.
Yeah, my buddy Joe Lascola, I believe, is actually a frequent vendor there. He has Movie Dumpster. I think it's his website.
They make the pilgrimage. I'll see people from all over the U.S. Taking pics.
What part of Pennsylvania is it in? Is it more towards Pittsburgh?
The town it's in is actually Mahoning.
Yeah.
Although the theater is it's called the Mahoningville, I think. Or maybe the town is Mahoningville. I don't recall, but the single word Mahoning is used in reference to it a lot of the time. So
yeah.
Yeah, because I went to school in Pittsburgh, but I really didn't check out much of Pennsylvania itself.
Right. And what you were saying a moment ago about stores and physical locations where you can buy stuff. I mean, there's still a number of them. I was invited. I was a guest at one back in August. The Orbit DVD, which is in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And they have a huge store. I mean, I walked in and I was like, wow, this is like, and they had, everything, movies and posters, comics, and all the stuff that you would expect that fans would be looking for. And I remember I'm in there and I'm looking around and I go, wow, I can't believe you got all this space and you're actually like able to stay in business. And then he says, oh, well, come over here. And he walks me into like another section of the store just as big.
Yeah. There's Scarecrow. We got Scarecrow Video too, maybe in Missouri or something like that. They still rent out movies. I know they have Insomniac and DJ Stand the Man DVD we sent them.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are still VHS stores in business. There's one in the Spookies documentary. I shot, like my interview stuff at a store.
Was that Amoeba?
Is that, pardon me?
Was the name of that place Amoeba by chance?
No.
That's a biggie.
I forget where it is. It might be in a town near me called Chatham. Yeah. But again, that was a fairly large space, and the guy seemed to have like every VHS movie ever put on VHS.
Well, it's beautiful shots at the beginning of that documentary is, to see it on the shelf. Because, I mean, seeing all the VHSs in there, I mean, it's wonderful hearing that there is still...
Oh, it was perfect. I mean, I can't believe that I discovered this place so near to me.
Out of curiosity, how did the Vinegar Syndrome... I guess assembling everything. How did that?
I think they had been, I mean, they're pretty much, they have their ear to the ground and they sort of know what's out there. They were aware of, films that are either, just represented in very poor quality prints, or they're incomplete, or, there's like, there's a market there for something with a disc with extras and that sort of thing. So, I mean, I think they've been on top of that for a while. And I think Spookies was something they were looking at for a while.
Yeah.
Myself and one of my partners, Tom Doran, who passed away a few years back, had been for a number of years we'd thought about, all right, well, maybe if we could somehow get the rights ourselves, we could bring it out, and then somebody might give us money to make a sequel, because that's probably the easiest way for us to get money to make anything. Cool. And we went in circles, and the film changed hands over the years. It was owned by Vestron Video at one point, who had released it over in Europe. But eventually we traced it back all the way back to Michael Lee. And at that point, it was like, all right, well, Michael Lee is never going to give us the rights to our own film after what we went through with him. So we had to abandon that idea. But a couple of years later, Vinegar Syndrome came in, and the guys who did the documentary were guys I already knew. So that worked out great. And, unfortunately, I had kept as much stuff as I could over the years, and I had the biggest stash of materials that helped provide, extras for the Blu-ray. I have to say I'm really happy with the job they did. The documentary won a Rondo Award.
I was just going to ask that.
And
That was an
and I
amazing
think
documentary.
it was great because it sort of it finally gave a clear enough picture of what had happened, because there was so much bullshit information out there for many years. There was the constant refrain that it was two movies that were shoved together, that the original filmmakers were all fired. And technically we weren't fired. We walked out because we couldn't take the abuse anymore.
Yeah.
And we must have really been sick of it, because we put up with shit for like a year and a half prior to that.
And it's frustrating. I've unfortunately had to walk off one or two sets in my life, and in the way it fucks with your head, I mean, it can really kind of just be damaging to a certain extent.
No, it is that. Well, creative people are all, are sensitive people one way or another, and it's like, I mean, myself and the guys that I made the film with, I mean, all we wanted to do was make the best goddamn film we could make. And and we did not even get the respect or acknowledgement of that. We got like, mostly like ire and anger and misunderstanding, I think, of what our motivations were.
And was it Tortured Souls? Was that the
Twisted Souls?
Twisted Souls. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'm just, after what happened to the film, and we sort of all, we did not like the way it wound up, and we sort of disassociated ourselves, and we found that there was no way for us to benefit by our association with it. It just it didn't help, career-wise in any way whatsoever. But that suddenly the film, the Blu-ray came out, the time was right. The 80s, the people who were fans in the 80s love it, and the people who were fans in more recent years seem to love it.
Yeah.
And
this is despite the fact that I think it has a million problems as a film, but that doesn't seem to matter because it's fun.
Yeah. And I mean, I was so happy when I heard that it won that Rondo Award, because I think they're few and far between to have a really good documentary, and just the shit that you went through. I mean, I love how it sets the record straight, and I love how the documentary is able to be, it's very entertaining. There is tragedy to it, but I think the documentary is just as fascinating as the movie itself.
No, that's said all the time. That I mean, people will say the documentary is more interesting and more fun than the movie, whatever. And I certainly can't disagree with that, because I think it tells an interesting story. It's unfortunately a fairly typical and common type of a story for filmmakers.
Yeah.
Just having to go through all this shit, and all you want is to just make the best film possible, and you are being thwarted at almost every juncture. It's just
it was, but I think I even heard Peckinpah had one of his films taken away from him.
Oh yeah, no, that happened to almost any director. Very few directors, I think, would not had to put up with that kind of shit at some point.
Yeah, and it seems like whether if it's the studio system basically saying make changes, or if it's the distributor and
I mean, back to tell the truth, up until probably like the 70s, if you were a studio director, you contracted with a studio, you didn't have final say over the film. You didn't have a right to a director's cut.
Yeah.
Because didn't the concept of the director's cut only really come in within the past, like in the
No,
80s?
there have been a lot of films that had, there was an original cut, and then the director's cut might have still existed, but the commercial play, the theatrical play of the film may have just been whatever the studio wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's great that 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 video mediums have provided this opportunity for films. Even now, I mean, new films will come out with the director's cut and the theatrical cut on the same Blu-ray in the same Blu-ray package. And I think that's the way it should be, myself.
I agree. It's wonderful, because I think a lot of people, especially horror fans, bonus content, I think, is almost something that people want a little more than the movie itself, because
that's because it's new. It's something different. It adds to, especially if it's a movie that you really have an affection for. It's not like it's I mean, because I've discovered a lot of fans don't even care about the quality of the movie. Many fans prefer VHS quality just because it has that nostalgic ring for them.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I don't agree with that myself, but I
No, and
understand.
I understand that. I recently acquired actually a Video Treasures copy of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and as many I mean, to see it cleaned up, it looks gorgeous, and I
Right.
love 4K. It looks great, but when you have that grain, or you have that, kind of
No,
VHS.
that's what all those films I think had at that time, especially if they were shot on 16 millimeter. And a lot of them were technically not very good, no matter what they were shot on.
Yeah.
It feels like there's something sort of like, oh, gee, I shouldn't be seeing this. Should this even be playing in my movie theater?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Spookies has been a long time coming. Horror fans been wanting that to get a good a just do for a long time. You know what I mean? And it's such a great flick. It's super creepy. I rewatched it again recently. I like to always try and do it around the Halloween time. And
Mhm.
I watched it like 3 days ago, and it was like the creepiness of it, and some of those makeups are fucking. It's
The
such
makeup, I think, are great.
yeah. It's like yeah, I can only imagine, man. You can tell how much work went into making it, and
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think a lot of that can be attributed to our special effects people, certainly.
Sure, yeah,
But also, I mean, myself and my partners, we were real fans and we were very strict in terms of what we did or didn't like. And, we wanted to have like just a bunch of unseen, previously, never before used monsters. And I think we more or less succeeded with that. And that was the heart of our original film. And it's still the heart of the film as it exists now, except that all the monster scenes are shorter than they originally were
yeah.
and the whole context of them is completely different.
I mean, I think one person who really is not well known, but I think he is well known in certain circles is John Dodds. And I think that spider creature with that transformation. I mean, I grew, I have an original poster of the Deadly Spawn as well, because
Right.
that's one of those but I mean, but with what Dodds and Gabe Bertalos, I can't remember if Jennifer Aspinwall was on your shoot or
No,
not.
she was on both Spookies and Street Trash. I brought her over from Spookies, and I mean, and Jennifer. I mean, the thing is, I mean, Jennifer, Gabe, Vince Guastini, who worked with us,
Yeah,
all became top Hollywood professional makeup effects people.
Yeah.
yeah. And didn't Jennifer win for Saturday Night Live?
She won Emmys for
Multiple
Saturday Night
awards?
Live. Back in like the years where they were doing lots of character makeups. So she did stuff on like Eddie Murphy and other people. It just I don't in recent years I haven't seen them rely on that kind of stuff as much.
Yeah, I mean, now you can just have a push of a button and kind of augment things where you can still do it practically, but some people just might not want to give you the time, and it's wonderful when people will give you the time to do practical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mainstream mentality is more or less like, oh well, we'll do it with CGI later or something like that. I don't think that's the best way to do anything, even if you have the capability. I just feel you should have an idea of what you're doing in the first place.
Well, absolutely, because there's nothing more frustrating when you have your first day on set and you hear, "We'll fix it in post." That's the last thing you want to hear.
Yeah, but I hear it all the time, and I've heard it
Hear
from like
Billy
people,
say it all the
I've heard
time.
it from like directors who have no clue how it will be fixed.
Yeah, we'll figure it out later.
Yeah. My goodness. My goodness. So Spookies being a fan favorite of mine around the HoRRoRWEEN season. Frank, any movies that you particularly like to watch around the
I
horror?
don't know. I mean, I'm not like one of these people who has a marathon of like horror movies around
Yeah.
Halloween. Because I watch all kinds of movies and I watch all kinds of movies all the time. Um, when I'd say I primarily watch stuff that's older, but at the same time, I'll watch, anything new that seems interesting to me.
Yeah.
Uh, it's gotten harder to know what to do in recent years with so many like direct to video super cheapy movies being made, and there's like frequently like no point of reference for them, so you
Yeah.
have no idea how good or bad they really might be.
You watch anything recently that you?
I just watched this new film called Talk to Me,
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I've heard the title.
Right, which is about this sort of what seems to be like a statue, a sculpture of a hand that people, like grab it and they're possessed by a spirit. And so like a bunch of teenagers start doing all this shit like as a regular thing they do for parties.
It's great marketing. I've seen the trailer.
And the film was actually pretty good. It was actually more tame than I expected it to be. It was done by there were a bunch of guys who had a wild video channel, which I can't even remember the name of right now, but they're Australian, and they used to do all kinds of amazing action and stunt stuff, and integrated with opticals and CGI. And it was I discovered their channel a few years ago, and I thought it was pretty impressive, and I wasn't surprised they could get money to do a film. But this is very different, and even though it's kind of it's out there, it's kind of restrained and more adult than I expected.
Growing up, who were some of your favorite monsters?
I,
Universal or whatever.
It was, well, here's the thing. Here's how I saw and experienced things. It's like the first ones I saw were probably miscellaneous cheap movies from the 50s and a lot of the American International monster movies, and and then I sort of started to see other stuff. I didn't see like the Universal horror films until I was maybe like 14, 15 years old, because they were off television for many years.
But those AIP movies, definitely have some resonance.
Oh yeah. Well, they really. I think all kids are sort of fascinated by the monster thing. I mean, there's that sort of fantasy element and etc. But mine didn't pass. I mean, I think all kids have an initial interest and then they'll look for other things. But I was very fascinated with all that stuff. So I grew up just watching horror movies, reading horror stories, and big fondness for black and white. I think black and white atmospherically is probably better than color.
It makes the theater a little darker. It can make things a little creepy.
Well, I mean, for certain films, I think it helps more to give you the mood and the atmosphere that you want.
Absolutely.
I mean, I feel a lot of films don't know how to use. I mean, like black is something a lot of filmmakers are afraid to use. Like, even in dark scenes, you can see everything, and you should have a little, break that up a little bit.
Yeah. They're afraid to go too dark.
Well, too dark, or lighting has like, along with everything else, has become somewhat easier with digital video than it was with film.
Yeah.
But I feel like with every step in technology, it's also an excuse for a certain number of people to just do things in a lazier way, because it's easier now, so we don't really have to do what we were doing before.
Yeah, I mean, sort of your difference between lugging all that heavy equipment and then getting a few lights and a camera.
No, I'm really happy in terms of the technology where filmmaking is right now. I mean, I prefer film over video, but I defy like 99% of people to tell me whether something was shot on film or video if it's shot well.
Yeah, Spookies is one of the films that got me as a kid. I remember there's a couple films that I've seen before, and they burnt themselves into my brains. Toxic Avenger is one of them, and Spookies is the other. There's a third one.
It's interesting because there's been sort of a weird, I don't know if it's exactly a rivalry or whatever that's gone on with, because Lloyd Kaufman apparently had a grudge concerning Spookies, and at least from what I've heard, I've never met Lloyd or spoken to him directly.
Yeah,
I hosted the Trauma offices years ago on several occasions. Never met Lloyd. His brother Charlie, who directed Mother's Day, was a teacher of mine in college.
Oh, very
wow.
And but Lloyd apparently always had sort of a grudge about not Spookies, Street Trash.
Street Trash.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I don't know what it was between.
He supposedly, from what I have heard, he was supposed to go to a screening and he was late, and he called him and said, "Oh, can you hold this screening for me?" And Roy Frumkes, who was the writer and the central producer, said, "No." And then he's remained sort of pissed about that ever since. On the commentary track on Toxic Avenger, he starts bitching about Street Trash.
He does, and I thought that was fascinating because for years I'm like, what movie is that? And then when I discovered Street Trash, when I watched the documentary about Roy Frumkes and the making of that, and revisited that, I'm like, I think he's talking about Frumkes, and I think it was Street Trash. So if you kind of know like that New York 1980s, kind of the DIY and who's who, you can kind of piece things together.
Well, he actually felt that like Street Trash was ripping off his Trauma style.
Yeah,
at least I've heard this from various sources. And the fact is, at that time, I think Street Trash was being made maybe when the first Toxic Avenger film came. I don't remember exactly, but none of us had seen it. I didn't see the Toxic Avenger for years afterwards. And I, if I can stick up for Street Trash, I think Street Trash is better made than any Trauma film.
What year did you guys film Street Trash?
I'm trying to remember exactly. 85 into 86, more or less, between beginning pre-production
and Jimmy Murrow. I mean, my God, I mean that film looks like a $10 million movie.
Yeah.
Well, he was one of the fortunate few 19-year-olds who owned a Steadicam at the time,
and that's rare.
Big,
$35,000 piece of equipment.
That's big.
Because when I saw Street Trash in the cinematography, I think shortly afterwards I discovered I think it was the second or third sequel to Basket Case, and right. I believe it was Jimmy also was the DP on that, and it's just
was he? I don't know. I don't know that's true, but I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I believe it was the one where they opened like in the circus or something like that. I don't know if it was a flashback, if that was the second one or third one. But I mean, didn't Jimmy go on to win in like
Jimmy is one of the top Steadicam operators in Hollywood. He's also a director with lots of TV credits. He's done a few movies. I think I may have heard recently he's doing the new Kevin Costner movie.
Oh wow.
That's
awesome.
But I think, I mean, we're also fortunate in terms of things like, his dad was raising the money. So he was giving his son a little more leeway in terms of, because we went over budget and, there was never any talk about, oh, well, now we're going to have to cut corners and do that, sort of like, oh, well, we got to get some more money.
And I also loved hearing in that documentary how for catering, you guys went to, Tony Timpone's, from Fangoria. I guess it was his father's like bakery or something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, we for catering we went to a million things. We didn't have, I mean, on a film with actual money, they will usually get a craft services company to come in and just put everything together and whatever. But on Spookies, we went the route of because we were living on this estate where the mansion was, and we had most of the crew living there. I actually had a kitchen going, so I was like more or less running a hotel with meals happening that were made there. But on Street Trash, we went out and we bought food from numerous companies, and I mean, I remember the food being pretty good, to tell the truth.
Yeah.
So we must have been in the right location in terms of the local businesses we dealt with. But yeah, I mean, I look back at it now. I had, my friend Jamie, who I mentioned doing the Street Trash book, a couple of years, he said to me, he said, 'cause I was bitching about something. He said, but man, look at the facts. You've been associated with 3 cult classic horror movies.
Hell yeah.
And that was the first time I actually thought of it in those terms. I said, well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
And it must be, to have that realization, especially with, like the midnight screenings of these movies. I mean, I imagine at a certain point,
right, but just to understand, for years, this was not happening. I mean, Street Trash always sort of had a growing cult following through the years. And what's terrific about Street Trash is it seems to have remained as outrageous as when it was first made, because people are still bitching about it.
I mean, yeah, it pushes boundaries. I mean, the whole like penis scene. I mean, there's just so many wonderful, crazy moments. I mean, it's almost like a beautiful fever dream, like one of those movies that might watch at like 3 o'clock in the morning, dozing in and out, but it's like you're still awake, because it just, you're just captivated by everything.
Street Trash is beautiful.
And I think, I mean, while we were making it, I mean, we were aware, we're making this movie and it's intentionally offensive, but it's not. I don't think it was designed, I don't think that we were thinking in terms of like, oh, we're going to provoke all kinds of people.
But it's not mean-spirited.
Etc. We were just doing stuff we thought was fun and funny. Exactly. Come up with an idea. And a lot of times you come up with an idea and say, wow, well, could we actually do that? Well, yeah, we could do it. We just have to be willing to do it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny too, because for some reason, I thought the whole thing with trauma and the kind of divide had something to do with the the gentleman, I believe his name was Pat Ryan, who was the heavyset
Actor?
individual.
Yeah, you know, I got that overall. I got that same impression. Well, Troma had a few people they had used in Toxic Avenger and then reused in some of their other films. That includes R.L. Ryan, you know, who was also known as Pat Ryan.
Very good actor.
He was like fantastic, and he came in. He like all the other people we auditioned. He came in. He auditioned. We said, "Wow, this guy's really good. We want him." And we cast some of his Troma actors without ever knowing there were Troma films, without ever seeing those films.
Yeah.
So his misgivings about that are kind of off target.
Yeah, because I thought it was interesting because I remember hearing, I think it was when The Burning was being filmed. I guess Madman was kind of getting close to production, and it seems like they became aware of one another. So they kind of augmented their scripts. So, you know, the whole Cropsey tale, they're not basically, you know, doing, you know, the same thing.
Right. I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm not the type of person, and the people I was working with, I don't think we were looking to rip off anything.
Exactly. You guys are making,
and the fact is, we never saw the other films to have that ability in the first place. You know, but I think what he thinks of in terms of, I mean, we had R.L. Ryan, and then we had a woman named, I believe her name is Chris McNamee, who is in several films, including prominently in things like Nukem High, who's like this outrageous looking woman with this totally wild, crazy, big spiked punk hair, and she's in one scene in Street Trash, and I think that combined with Ryan made him think, oh, they're just ripping me off.
Huh. Huh. I wonder if they like held that against the actors and you know.
I don't think so.
I know the heavy actor passed young, I believe, if I remember.
Oh correctly. yeah, Bob Ryan.
Yeah,
a while back, and it's a shame because I had another script I wrote a part for him in, and I was
great. I love
it. No, he was such a sweet guy. He was totally not the character he is in Street Trash.
Yeah.
I love that documentary, the Meltdown Memories. I mean, I thought that was another wonderful documentary. Was that even nominated for a Rondo? Or do you know?
I don't think so. I mean, I have no idea when the Rondo Awards began, but I mean, the Street Trash documentary was done back sometime in the 90s. I don't remember exactly.
Okay, yeah, because you know, I was even fascinated how he even talked about like Vestron. I think Dave Whitten, if memory serves correct, is the name.
He was a big supporter of the film. He was the guy that was really behind it and felt that it was special, and that it, you know, he's the one who designed the whole initial release, doing it as midnight shows, and you know, and I was in disagreement with a lot of the way they wanted to sell it at the time, because they felt it had cult potential. Yes, they were right, but they wanted to immediately start putting it into midnight shows like it was a cult movie. And I didn't feel that was the right thinking. I think cult movies sort of happen. You can't make them happen. You can't tell someone that a movie is a cult movie until it's proved that pretty well in advance.
Yeah.
If memory serves correct, I thought it was hysterical. He was thinking of like a piece of artwork. It's like, we're gonna say Street Trash, then underneath it was like, we're gonna put like "fuck you" or something like
that. No, that was actually one of the ad campaign ideas. That was for the poster, which would be like Street Trash, fuck. And that really is sort of the tone of the film. Even though I really think I mean, there are some people who think the film is like kind of mean spirited, and I could argue that there are a couple of scenes that are somewhat mean spirited, but for the most part, I think the characters are kind of fun and lovable.
Yeah. And
despite being scum of the earth.
The comedy that comes through in that is so laugh out loud funny. And Jamie Lorenz always comes to mind, you know, with his role. And, you know, but it's a wonderful cast that you basically were able to.
No, I think we were lucky in that sense, in that we did just an open casting call like so many other films. And, you know, certain people we did bring into ourselves, like Jim Lorenz was a student at the School of Visual Arts, which is where a lot of our crew was from, where Jimmy went to school. And, you know, we all, you know, thought he had something to begin with. But what worked in Street Trash is the actor that he is in most of his scenes with Tony Darrow. They just they played off of each other really well, and it got like kind of competitive, and they were just, you know, and so what was originally just one scene went to like 3 or 4 scenes, including the end scene in the film, which was, you know, written late in the process. And you know, but I think the whole cast. I mean, there's several people I think are just fucking excellent. The guy who plays Wizzy, Bronson's right hand man, in the auto graveyard.
Yeah.
He was the manager of the wrecking yard. He was like such a
Really?
totally like he had never acted in his life, and I think he gives one of the best performances in the film.
Yeah, because another character or actor I like to talk about. I don't believe he's with us anymore, but he was so fucking funny in Spookies. I don't know if it was Peter.
Oh, Peter Isillo, yeah. No, he passed away a number of years ago.
Was he also a student as well, or how did?
No, I knew Pete from my friends I met him actually through my Spookies partners,
Okay.
Tom and Brendan. And Pete was like after we were so disappointed and bothered by what had happened to Spookies, Pete just went on like nothing happened and just kept talking up and promoting Spookies every chance he got, even though nobody had seen it or knew what it was, even after it had been released back in the late 80s.
Yeah, because one film I think that's very good that a lot of people don't talk about is Igor and the Lunatics.
Igor and the Lunatics.
Igor and the Lunatics.
Even though they shouldn't have used that spelling of Igor. Mm-hmm. Because that always, you know, unless you know, you always assume it's Igor.
Yeah.
But usually Igor is spelled with a Y instead of an I.
You're right.
Cromer acquired that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and they recut it a little bit, and it's supposedly going to be coming out soon through Vinegar Syndrome. We'll see.
I mean, yeah, they've definitely been grabbing some of the Trump titles, you know. And I just did the pre-order on Rabid Grannies, so I'm kind of interested to see how.
I actually like that film. I like Rabid Grannies.
I think Rabid Grannies. I mean, I think of like Peter Jackson and what he was doing in New Zealand. Like,
I mean, to me, it has there's some of the tone of Spookies in it. It's just sort of like frivolous and nuts and things, you know, are happening, and it's entertaining, and so many films of that sort just aren't entertaining.
No, but it's wonderful how there are these little filmmakers in certain parts of the world or Europe and what they come up with, because I can't remember if that was like a Danish or like a Belgium.
I think I know what you're saying. I think it might be French, but I don't think so. The French don't usually make films like that. Yeah, I forget. Belgium sounds right.
But even the effects in that for their time. I mean, it was amazing what you guys were doing, with kind of that, bubblegum, technology, back then.
I mean, and I've said this recently in a few interviews that a few years ago I watched or rewatched like almost every effects film from that period in the 80s, from Gremlins on. Gremlins is sort of the one that began that revolution and a lot of those puppet techniques. And for the most part, a lot of those films that might be better well known, or at least were for years, like Ghoulies and others, Spookies has better special effects, even though we had a fraction of the money they supposedly had for films like that.
But that's a huge testament to the wonderful folks, that
it is. No, it's. I mean, like I said, we were lucky enough to get very talented makeup effects people at the start of their career. And they were, just like trying to do whatever they could to do amazing work. They wanted to impress, and the effects are like the one thing that was not, even though, here's the thing, the effects are what put us in our original shoot on Spookies, that put us over budget, as happened with a lot of films, partially because we had no idea what to expect. We had done some effects shoots on promos we did for other unnamed projects and things like that. But the fact is, we initially, we budgeted the film, I scheduled everything, and effects never go right the first time.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Even the first 10 or 20 times.
It's always the last take. It's the last take that's manageable that you use.
No, it's like sometimes things just work and it's like, oh, great, it looks wonderful, whatever. Other times it's like you're trying to, after every take, you're trying to figure, all right, how can we make this work?
Yeah. And I've been in that boat where you're there at the 11th hour, you're doing the effect, and it's like, how does that look? And it's usually like the last one. It's like, that works, because sometimes you're trying to figure out the coordination. It might not be working at first. and you know, the better, the more you do, the better you get, and you know, you need to have that
Right.
repetition.
And at that time, especially, it's not like there were totally established ways of doing all these things.
It was
So
a testing ground. I mean,
even though it had been done, in a number of films, we were like, we were in the dark on a lot of stuff, and the effects guys were sort of, experimenting and learning as they worked. I mean, the thing is, what that really taught me is if you're doing effects, you need an entirely separate period in pre-production where you're doing nothing practically but working on the effects and making them work in front of a camera before you get onto the film set.
exactly. Yeah. And that's what I'm doing with these gentlemen here for the Wicked Hollows. I mean, it's been
Right. I mean, Spookies was a situation where every time we did a scene, it was like, and something had to happen. This is all right. This is the first time. Hopefully it will work. And sometimes it did, and frequently it did not.
Yeah, I always assumed Spookies to have like a lot of the budget went. I always assumed that that's where a lot of the budget went, into the special makeup.
Well, here's the thing. I found that as far as practical effects goes, I mean, just like with everything, with almost any movie, big or small, most of the money for anything goes into salaries.
Yeah.
It's the actual materials to do those effects were a small portion of the budget. The time spent, the number of hours that were necessary to get this stuff to happen. Now, keep in mind also, everybody was being severely underpaid. We were all working ridiculous hours on like a 6-day-a-week schedule. And, we just, a lot of it came down to, you just had to hope things worked. And eventually, almost everything worked out pretty well, more or less. But I would not want to go through that again. I would demand anything I work on at any point in the future that has any kind of special effects of practical effects of that nature. I would demand, or it's like, all right, this has to be perfect now.
Was there any big effects that you just did, it didn't look right, you pulled out of the flick, cut it, or wanted to have it didn't put in the film?
Not so much. I mean, the more disappointing factor is that the woman who took over the film and shot the new scenes and totally re-edited it, cut down all the monster scenes along with I mean, I can understand cutting out dramatic scenes or dialogue or whatever, but why would you cut down these monster scenes?
That makes no sense, because the monster's supposed to sell the product. When you start eliminating that, then you're changing up too many.
I mean, you mentioned the spider scene before. I think that's the best monster, and that's my favorite scene. But in the original film, it was so much better. It was so much longer. But if you actually look at that stuff and time it, I mean, the spider scene, the actual effects portions of it are over in like 30 seconds.
Yeah. And didn't John make like 4 or 5 different heads or something? I mean, that was really elaborate.
Whole spider body with legs and all this. I mean, I don't know why none of this stuff got seen.
And it's such a shame, because you hear, effects artists invest months and months, of creating beautiful pieces of sculpture, and they only get seen for only a matter of seconds, if not fractions of seconds, when it comes to screen time.
Well, I mean, a lot of times it has to serve the film, so it's more important that the scene work than that something be seen. But in this case, this was just haphazardly cut, and for the most part, I mean, I think the reason most of our stuff was cut out was to insert her stuff, so she was able to grab a co-directing credit.
Have you guys ever had any interaction?
There it is.
We haven't. She was contacted when the documentary was being made. Oh no, pardon me. They couldn't find her when the documentary was being made. They found her eventually and managed to get in touch. I was at one time offered a chance to do a podcast, sort of confronting her, but I really wanted to, but I had really mixed feelings about it. Meaning, I would have nothing nice to say to this person. I know nothing she can say is going to make amends, and she's probably going to continue to lie, because I have a lot of information about her. I mean, I knew people who knew her and knew what was going on during the stuff that she shot at that time. So I have like exact quotes from her that I wrote down, etc. And beyond that, I mean, in subsequent years, I've heard she more or less pulled the same routine on other films, where she wormed her way into things. I mean, she was Erica Havens. It was a fairly big 80s porn actress.
I've heard the name.
and she wanted to. She was doing some editing, and she wanted to direct and etc. And she initially got approached about editing the film after we had left, and and we had a rough cut. I mean, all we needed to do was add our optical effects in the big climactic scenes. There was a lot of work to do there, but that was all that was missing. And
that would have been so amazing if you had those ghosts in there, because that's what I loved about the documentary.
I convinced Michael Lee that this was like, the film was like unsalvageable unless she shot enough footage to constitute 50% of the movie.
I mean, it sounds like it's just a tough situation,
All I can say is she was the one. He apparently trusted her, where he was like constantly on our backs and not trusting us. I think the fact that he was screwing her most likely while this was going on had something to do with this.
That's probably a big part of it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you know. There's a filmmaker called Roger Watkins.
Yep.
Who did films like Last House on a Dead End Street and other exploitation around that time. And I saw an email from someone who was corresponding with him where he goes into detail about how she came onto this film I was doing, and then she started fucking everybody, and then the next thing I know, I'm off the film.
It happens.
I mean, it's really interesting, the trials and tribulations.
If she wants, she can come and sue me for all this libelous stuff I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it's just the unfortunate shit you have to deal with when it comes to losing something and then having someone else finish it when you basically were there from the inception, the writing process, trying to make it, and then where things got so unbearable, unfortunately, you guys had to walk away. I'm sure Michael Lee is probably basically thinking, we need to finish this fucking thing. And then, that whole series of circumstances comes in just to finish the movie, but it's not, this, I mean, it definitely feels like two movies, because
one has nothing to do with the other.
Exactly.
And she wrote that stuff in so that like she thought it would intercut with scenes that were already there to make them look as if they were actually connected. And it's very obvious where one thing ends and the other begins. And I mean, I don't know what to say because that's it just seems like such. I mean, if somebody had come to me and said, "Oh, we need you to finish a film or something," at that time or as a filmmaker, I'd take the opportunity. I'd be glad to.
Yeah.
But I would somehow also consider who were the original filmmakers, what were their intentions.
Exactly. Yeah. And actually, real quick, who was the guy who the gentleman who played the elder, who was kind of coordinating, all these different.
Oh, Creon. I have no idea. That's the only film credit he has. That's the only thing I can find about him on the internet, and he's dead.
He was so interesting to watch, just the way he carried himself in the movie. And I just, I thought we would see more of him, but we didn't.
It happens. He was great though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a good person to ask about the added scenes because most of them I view with a very dim.
Yeah.
Although I have written the Spooky sequel, which I'm hoping to start fundraising soon. And Creon is a major character, even though he's never seen on screen.
Very cool. I mean, that's wonderful that, keeping the, spirit of, the.
Well, I mean, to tell the truth, a lot of what's in this new script is sort of mocking what happened to the first film. It actually it takes place in the town where the mansion supposedly is.
Yeah.
And there's a whole plot involving a ruthless corporation that's taking over the town, and so there's a little bit of a poke at what happened to us. Although
I love it. It sounds a little meta, but it sounds like it's.
Well, the real point is it's the kind of film that myself and especially my partner Tom Doran, who he passed away in 2017, and I continued to work with him for years after, and we've developed lots of projects, almost made films a few times. I mean, funding would come along and just slip away, and this is the story of all filmmakers, as you probably know.
Yeah.
But he he for years, I mean, he was far more bitter about the experience than I was. He was one of the directors. He had, you know, creatively, it was a little bit more of a stab in the heart with everything that happened. And he for years just would say, I'm even if somebody came to me and said, I'll give you money, I would never write a sequel to Spookies. I never ever want to hear about it again. I will never do that. A few years later, he calls me up out of the blue and says, well, I wrote the outline for a sequel to Spookies. And it was surprisingly good, and it took the whole thing. It basically just, let's put it this way: there's like one scene that sort of does connect it, and there's mention of the name Creon, but beyond that, it's just an insane asylum of a horror movie. That's exactly how I've described it to somebody. It's an insane asylum of a monster movie, is what I say.
That sounds phenomenal. I love how you're
my cameo.
I'm definitely intrigued. You know,
well, I mean, we want to take what we feel people have, you know, mentioned, you know, time and time again, is what impressed them in Spookies. And yeah, there's monsters. Yeah, there's lots of monsters. There's like more monsters than you can deal with, and you've never seen any of them before.
Yeah,
think you might be able to get John Dodds to come out and do some stuff for you.
I've spoken to John. Now, I first spoke to John when I first started this script like a couple of years ago. And I spoke to him at the time, and he said, well, I'm just too busy. I don't think I could be involved. He's been for a number of years doing practical effects for Broadway shows, stuff like Beauty and the Beast. He did Young Frankenstein on stage, and anything that involves what would be formerly have been considered movie special effects. He's the go-to guy. The last thing I heard, and this is over a year ago, he was going with these productions around Europe as they were opening up in various cities. So I don't know if he's still too busy, but I will talk to him again before we go into production. But I've got Gabe Bartalos and Vincent Guastini, who were on our original production, who both were like delighted to hear that there would be a Spooky sequel. And so I'm not worried about the effects part of things. Although, I mean, what I've written, I feel is like insanely ambitious. It's like 12 monster movies packed into one.
I love it. It sounds great.
That's the word I was looking for earlier. Was Spookies ambitious? Very ambitious with all those.
Well, I know. I mean, I have everybody I've given this script to, especially like the makeup people. I said, well, you're going to probably think I'm nuts, but I just want to make the most amazing movie of this sort that we can possibly make. And this is in part, I feel a responsibility to my partner, Tom, who I felt was really just a brilliant creator and who never got his due, and who, you know, came out of Spookies with sort of like, you know, a crushed heart in many ways, and kept trying to recover from that for years. But I think this is different than anything that's been around for a while. It's got elements of maybe stuff like Critters or Gremlins in it, but it's different. It's more expansive. It's very character driven. I tell people now, oh, it's an adult movie.
Yeah.
You know, and I simply mean that in the sense that it's Spookies ultimately as a result of what Michael Lee wanted us to do, and then being transformed again into another movie. It's a lot more simple-minded. It's a dumb horror movie, and I have to, you know, admit that certainly. This is not a dumb horror movie.
Actually, because it's funny how you mentioned like Critters. Were you ever approached by people like that might not have seen like the artwork and be like Spookies, and they might think like Critters, Ghoulies, might get the impression that it's kind of like
Michael wanted to call it Spookies from like almost the minute we met him. He kept saying, well, why don't we call it Spookies? Right. You know, he would do that all the time. He would like out of nowhere come up with like ridiculous titles and say, well, why don't we call it this? And we'd say, all right, well, what does that mean? He'd say, I don't know.
His contribution in the documentary where he's like, kids love farting. And when he basically threw that concept in there.
No. He loves farting.
Oh, he loves farting.
He loves farting more than
I'll pull my finger all the time. He was the guy, pull my finger.
Yeah. I mean, and supposedly what happened with that is it was just originally put in there as a joke by the sound man, by the guy doing the sound mix. And because he knew Michael thought farts were so funny. And then Jeannie Joseph, who had directed, you know, the other footage, saw that, and she was like so upset she like walked out and didn't come back till the next day. But the fact is, I didn't find this out until later years when I listened to the actual music soundtrack. like I would say like 95% of the farting is part of the music track.
Oh man, that was just like one of those scenes that just like, I love the visual of the Muckman, but the audio, it's like, what is this? And it just
well, here's what you got to imagine that it also continues to bug me because I frequently hear from people like the only thing they want to talk about in the movie is what they call the farting zombies.
Yeah, yeah.
And that bothers me because I hate thinking like, is this really where most people are? This is like the only thing they can relate to.
No, I mean, to me, it's that John Dodge spider creature. It's there's so many amazing elements that I just think make this movie truly a wonderful piece of art.
Right. I mean that scene, and we refer to them as the Muckmen, and that was what was in the script, and what we referred to them on the set as, and somehow that made it. That's still what they're referred to as generally. That wound up on the boxes and in the marketing, which was kind of surprising. But the fact is that scene actually was like really kind of upsetting and like somewhat scary. They were, it was, again, it was about twice as long as what's there. There were 3 Muckmen. You only see 2 in the scene. But it was, they were menacing. I mean, they're not someone you'd want to meet in a dark basement.
Sure.
Is it true that Gabe actually picked up Michael Lee's car or something like that? We're trying to get away from set once and he wouldn't let him.
I have heard this. I didn't see it. Gabe was pretty strong at the time.
Oh, he's a big monster of a man. He's a great guy. I mean, real tall dude.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine him being that pissed off. Yeah. That was the thing. Michael seemed to have this idea that, all right, well, I'm paying your salaries, I therefore own you, and that's how he treated people.
I hate that mentality. I've worked with some people, unfortunately, and it's difficult because it's like, well, what do? It's like you can either walk away from the project, and not get paid, or you can create and endure is the only word I can think of, and just hopefully finish to the best of your abilities and see what happens. But it just sucks for all you guys, considering how so many people had to walk away dealing with the insanity of this guy who just didn't make things easy on you.
Yeah, and I don't, I mean, looking back at it, it's possible things could have been worked out at the time and we could have remained on the film. But it was, we were part of it. I mean, if I'd been older and had a little more experience and sort of had an idea of how to handle situations like this, I think we could have helped to fix things to some extent. But at the same time, I mean, he was just impossible. No matter what we did to please him, he couldn't be pleased.
Yeah. I mean, but you're right. I mean, you evolve, as a filmmaker, you figure out maybe years later how you could have handled things, differently in retrospect. And it's just that learning experience that you get from one production to the next.
I mean, it doesn't help that like when you're in the midst of something like that, as a creator, you're just very emotionally involved. So you're not able to like distance yourself and just look at it rationally.
Yeah.
If something happens, if you feel you've been wronged, you're going to react to that. If someone is, giving you a hard time, you're going to give them something in return. But it had to be pretty bad for us to have walked off, because I put up with like essentially like abuse from him every day for a year before that.
Yeah. I mean, when we finish recording, if you guys are interested, I could tell you a story because I work with someone.
Just say it, Bill. We'll bleep the name. We've all three of us to do.
I worked with
talked about people, people.
A director many moons ago, my very first movie, and it actually starred Michael Berryman, and the director was actually by the name of the famous, and he was definitely an eccentric. Here's this guy. He's, it's just, it's quite a lineage, his family,
Right.
And it was just a situation where things were just a little extreme that I just was one of the first times I ever walked off set. And the movie eventually came out about 15 years later. It was retitled The Evil Within. And huh?
I know the title. Yeah, I've heard the title.
So and plus, it's interesting.
It's fun.
Yeah, but when you make something and you devote so much to it, and then, you know, for reasons you have to walk away, you know, it just it can fuck with your psyche, considering how invested you were or are at the time, you know, in conceptualizing, and then from there figuring out how to bring this stuff to fruition. And, you know, you're creating stuff as you go, and next thing you know, it's like, you know, when is the, you know, the straw going to break the camel's back here? Because you almost know that it's coming sooner or later. And unfortunately, when that does happen, it's like, all right, I wish you the best. Sorry, guys, but, you know,
I think Frank put it the best. You know, artists are kind of sensitive. You know what I mean? And you know,
Unfortunately, you know,
it's a good
yeah.
thing. Fortunate and unfortunate. That's why they're good artists. You know what I mean?
But I think we're, you know, I've gotten a thicker skin over the years because, you know, I also do construction.
but you do after you get enough abuse.
You do, yeah. Or you know, you
Yeah.
endure enough, you know, you get a thicker skin.
Paying them dues.
And
Oh,
sometimes you can have those screaming arguments, and
Yeah.
then it's like, do you see where I'm coming from? And when they're like, I do. And I said, do you understand why I'm so fucking angry here? I do.
You know?
Do you think we could actually remedy this, or are we going to cut ties like this? And it's like, if they're smart, they're like, let's see if we can fix this. But if they don't have that approach, then you part, unfortunately, not under the best intentions. And as an artist, special makeup effects artist, you know, filmmaker, I like having those people I can work with, but sometimes, you know, those bridges might unfortunately get burned. But that's part of, I think, evolving as a filmmaker. You know, it's hard to have longevity in this industry without burning a few bridges. And I think that's all business. You know?
Everybody has these types of war stories. I mean, there's always going to be people. I mean, there's almost always somebody on any production who is a huge problem that you did not expect.
We can't help burning bridges, even if you like you're being the good guy about the situation, a good girl about the situation. It's like once somebody feels like they're wrong, you're automatically the bad guy. It's, you know, like with the creative thing, you know, it's a sensitive vibe.
The thing is that you always wind up in some kind of a hassle of some sort. I mean, to tell the truth, one of the prime areas I've always found is a problem on any production is that there's always like one or two actors who are for one reason or another a problem. And because they're in the film and because you've already shot with them, you have to sort of kowtow to whatever their demand is because they are in the film already and you can't afford to shoot new scenes.
Yeah. It's tough. There's a leverage game. You know, it's a crazy deal. I remember Eli Roth once said in an interview, he named off a couple things that everybody should do when they're making a movie, and one of the things was the first day you see people like talking, not working. You know, you fire them in front of everybody, and it lets them know you're not afraid to do it. You know what I mean? And sometimes you got it.
Beyond which, if your production is put together right, you're not going to have people with time to just stand around and talk.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm a big believer in art. You're not doing something, well, there's always something else you can do.
For sure. Yeah. Bill, you take a note?
Well, yeah, it's just no, but you're right though, absolutely. Because I mean, it's almost like that first penguin method, where the first penguin that dives into the water is the one that gets eaten. Yeah. And you know, and then you realize all the other penguins like, we better watch our backs. But you know, I think if certain filmmakers are smarter than others, you know, sometimes you can pull someone behind doors, actually have that dialogue that you need to, and then they part ways. Because if you're explosive or a megalomaniac, I mean, I love those old school megalomaniac directors because there's, you know, the vitality of, say, like
George. The thing is, there a lot of my favorite directors are that type of director, which only means that they're perfectionists. They really, really care about what they're doing. The movie, whatever the movie is they're working on at that moment, is more important than anything else.
Exactly. And George Cosmatos, who I think is a brilliant director, you know, he could be kind of loud and abrasive, but, you know, his intentions are pure, you know, because he knows where he's coming from. But when I heard the story of he basically tried laying into Stan Winston, he threw it right back at him. And I say, good for Stan, because sometimes you need to know when and where to stand your ground.
Well, you need to do that. Plus, it's like, I mean, a lot of directors, a power hungry or power mad type of director who's who's difficult to work with. He may be brilliant or he may be a complete creative dud. That the ability to do something good has nothing to do with their temperament in most cases. I think I mean I try anytime I've worked with people, I try and treat everybody like they're a friend and of great value to me. And because they are.
It's because it's war when you go to a movie.
Yes, I say that all the time.
And we talked about this of how we're in the trenches together. We're making this thing for the integrity of the production. We're just very gun ho. Pardon the sound there, but when things start to fray or deviate, then that's when what's going on here. And let's reassess real quick, because sometimes it's hard to reassess when you're already deep in the nitty and gritty. And sometimes you're lucky if you can pull yourself back a little bit and reassess and be like, all right, we're gonna make some changes, or let's just get through this.
Adapt for productivity.
I mean, the only way I've found to combat all this shit ultimately is planning and thinking things out in advance. And going to the set, like knowing precisely what you're doing and having communicated to everybody working there, here's what we're doing. I mean, I think that's a problem on a lot of productions. I mean, people go on to a set, after having worked for a few days, they have no idea what are we shooting today? What's this? What's going on? Everyone should know what's going on. I feel like everyone should be focused on, these people, we're having a dialogue scene and here's what they're talking about. We're special effecting today and that's all we're doing. And
I agree
with you. I think planning and communication are probably one of the two most vital things when it comes to producing.
And it's one of these things I've just found that it's like that's usually the cutting edge difference between something coming off reasonably effectively and things working and staying somewhat close to budget and stuff. Because if you don't plan, if you don't have every anticipation of what's going to go wrong to begin with, then all that and more will go wrong.
Yeah. And it's even frustrating because sometimes you need to think, what's the worst case scenario here? How can we avoid that? What can we do as a backup just in case? So the planning, it's just
I had a day shooting Spookies. We're on this big estate, right? And we've got two houses on it. One is the mansion. And then there's what was called the carriage house, which when the place was built was where the servants and the horses stayed, right? And it had been reconverted. So we had people, living in there for a couple of months. And we pretty much, oh gosh, I've lost my train of thought here. Go ahead.
Oh, the house, the carriage, where the people would stay.
Yeah, the carriage house and the mansion you're talking about.
No, I had some greater overall point to make that because I'm thinking of like several things simultaneously. Maybe I'll get back to it, but the real fact is that I tend to be a very organized person. I mean, I'll go the distance here of saying that if either of my other partners had to be wound up being the central producer of Spookies, I don't think they could have done the job that I did, because I'm naturally organized and I really feel a compulsion to bring things to completion and for everybody to walk out of a situation as happy with things as possible.
Were you always like that growing up? Like very much?
I think it's something that I had a skill for a while. And when we started, when I started working with those guys, and we all wanted to direct and we all wrote, but I think I had come from a background where I just I don't know what it was that prepped me for it originally necessarily, but I seem to have the organizing skills. I I always wound up being. I think the fact that one of my partners didn't type and I did helped me to get a lot of that type of stuff in my corner. But I mean, I look back now, and I'm really ultimately, despite all the bullshit that I went through and the fact that it basically screwed me for a number of years in my career and made everything a lot more difficult. I like where things are right now. I have films out there. People know the films. People know who I am. I've actually become a well-known name to a lot of horror fans, and that means an enormous amount. I did my first guest spot at a convention a couple of months ago, and I'm planning to do.
I was just going to ask that. Yeah, what was that like? You know, to kind of have these movies.
It was great. It was fun.
Seems like a cult luminary.
What I realized, like from the first day I was there, is that it really wasn't the type of convention that's best for me. It was, I would call it a horror lifestyle convention, meaning it was like focus was really cosplay and people coming dressed in. I mean, let's put it this way: every group that you can think of, punks, emos, goths, trans guys, anybody who likes to dress up as something was there.
Yeah,
and that's be more of an element. And there were everything was horror merchandise and stuff, but it wasn't like the conventions I'm used to, where it's like very movie oriented. It's very much real fans who know horror top to bottom.
And it must be scary how some of these fans probably know more about the movies than you do in certain
cases. I tend to know a fair amount about my own movies. But this was a case where a lot of people didn't have a clue who I was or what Spookies or Street Trash were. I mean, that changed a little bit. The convention got together we did a screening of Spookies at a local theater. So those were, and that was combined people from the convention itself, and then I guess just local residents in Knoxville, Tennessee, where we were, and that was pretty well attended. And that's where I got the people who I recognized as the real fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to doing more this year. I recently, after having been trying to get somebody for a while, I just got a rep. So I've got somebody now who's going to be going out for me to get me gigs. And this is important to me too, as I'm looking at trying to make the Spooky sequel.
Yeah, well, I'm friendly with some folks up here in Massachusetts in the convention scene. So, if you're at all interested and, maybe checking out some of the conventions out here.
Do you know Dustin Wurtenberg?
I've heard the name. I don't know.
There's a podcast called The Barons or something like that. I forget exactly what it's called, but I've become friendly with him. He's been very helpful to me. He wants to get me into the whole, Massachusetts horror scene. And I appreciate people like this who have connections already and know people in some of these regions. So maybe I may talk to you about that again soon.
And if any region out there listening, man, find your local horror convention and get Frank there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I get requests from fans all the time, all over the place. And I still haven't made, I haven't hit like a solid hardcore horror convention as far as I'm concerned. I was invited to, and then I was uninvited to the Living Dead convention in Monroeville.
Yeah.
Because
I
apparently,
heard about that.
Apparently, I had an online argument with one of the organizers like 4 years previously.
Oh.
And then I got invited. They booked me. They made like a banner for me, and then I got told I couldn't come.
Yeah, it's very cliquey, unfortunately.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shame because I'm one of the few zombies of any note that you can actually see and recognize on screen that hasn't gone to one of these events. And I'm being told by fans, oh, well, they've got like this guy who was like the 12th zombie from the left in a crowd scene, and
Yeah. First time I went to a horror convention ever, I was getting autographs from people that were like making sandwiches on the set of Dawn of the Dead. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I was buying I was just like getting, you know what I mean? Anything that was even closely related to it, I was like, here's my money, let's do it. You know what I mean?
How you mentioned the Monroeville, the very first official horror con I went to was when I was attending Tom Savini's at the time.
Right.
And went to that show. And I remember meeting what was his name? They were married. She was the nurse zombie and he was the escalator zombie. Clayton Hill. Very, very nice guy. And it's just fascinating how people just wanted to be one of the undead, especially like if you were a Pittsburgher, because a lot of them truly loved George and just wanted to,
George, I mean, I went to the set. I interviewed like a lot of people for a magazine article, and George just impressed me as, first of all, he impressed me as being like a totally prepared, very on top of things filmmaker. Meaning he was very aware of what he was doing. As soon as he finished a shot, it was like, all right, now we get to this. And I've been on sets where directors are sitting there with no real idea of what the next shot is.
Yeah.
And then Tom Savini, I mean, and I haven't seen Tom since this time, right? But I spent a couple of hours talking to him. You know, he was a big fan of Lon Chaney Sr. like I am, so we talked
Oh,
about that
yeah.
for a while.
Well, he named his son Lon.
Yeah, you know, and what's really great is that this is sort of, I mean, the horror community just continues to grow, and there's a real sense of support that I've gotten from so many people. You know, it's like I never realized I had this much support. You know, I wish my late partner was here to see this because he deserved to be a part of it.
Did he get to see any of the success of Spookies?
Not really. He passed away in 2017. The Blu-ray came out like 2 years later.
Yeah.
That's
some of the most heartbreaking stuff is you hear that stuff. There are these movies that we all love, and like the people that make it sometimes don't even ever get to find out how much it's loved. You know what I mean? Sad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it's a great thing to see it. Like, understand, the first time I saw Spookies in a theater, it was in Times Square. There were like 5 people in the theater.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a big deal. It was playing in Times Square, but still. But seeing it recently with fans, people I know that are having a good time and enjoying it. I mean, the first time I saw it with an actual crowd of fans who were cheering and laughing, and I just, at the end of the screen, I came up and I said, "You like Spookies?" And they were like, "Yeah, yeah." They're cheering, and I said, "What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Was that on the documentary that you guys did in there that they recorded by chance?
Is that in there?
Yeah.
No. There's some other scenes of us at one of the screenings that we went to that is in there.
So how many years ago would you say was this? You know, like actually seeing it with, you know, an audience, you know, and getting that fanfare and reception.
It was. I'm trying to think here. Maybe 2018, 19. I can tell you exactly. It's when the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie came out, and I know this because as I'm standing in line there, I look over. And there's another line for another movie, which was Guardians of the Galaxy. And I look over, and I realize I'm standing next to Frank Conniff of Mystery Science Theater.
Right? TV's Frank, very cool.
Right? And I was like, "Oh wow!" And I said, "I just want to tell you, you've given me so much enjoyment over the years." And I do this all the time with celebrities. I'm not interested in autographs, but if I like somebody and I feel like they've entertained me or they've done something that I respect, I just want to thank them for what they did.
Yeah.
And you know, and so I chatted with him for a little while, and then I went in to see Spookies with the crowd that had gone into the theater already. But that was a great experience. It put a new perspective on it for me.
Yeah, like we were saying before, there's certain like experiences that each filmmaker kind of gets to. It's like earlier when you go into the store, you pick your movie off the rack for the first time. Watching the movie with an audience for the first time, you know what I mean? These are beautiful.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough. I had a really good filmmaking class when I was in high school, and I made a couple of award-winning films.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's what sort of hooked me to some extent, is that I loved being able to have made the film, done all the hard work, and then sitting there with an audience that was reacting to everything the way it was intended.
Yeah, that's what I tell people.
Did you go to NYU?
No, I went to the School of Visual Arts.
Oh, very amazing school as well.
Right, which is where I met Roy Frumkus, who eventually wrote Street Trash.
Yeah. That's what I tell people when they, you come on set and it's a lot of running around and stuff, and they or like deal with the headaches of not having loot and stuff, and you go, that's just how good it is when it works. When you're watching it, when it's done and you're watching it, to go through all the madness of making it. I mean, that's how good the overall is, to go through the whole thing. Because people go, fuck, dude, you deal with a lot of issues. You deal with a lot of issues making these movies for 50 cents. You know what I mean?
No, well, the reaction I get now from people who have seen the documentary they'll say, "Gee, I feel so sorry for you guys."
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the victim of.
But yeah, exactly. That's the first thing you don't want to hear, because yes, there definitely are tragic opponents, but it's like, but it should be celebrated. But it's just, learning the stuff behind the curtain, of, what went into everything, and just all the different variables that you went up against. I mean, it feels like a beautiful tell all, being able to just, from these different folks saying what they're saying and just get it on the slab. And it's just, it's entertaining. I mean, it's a, you can learn so much, I think, as a filmmaker watching, movies that, maybe like a B movie rather than an A movie, because, yeah, you might have aspirations to be Martin Scorsese or whatever, but if you can watch like the Charlie Band catalog, you can figure out some stuff.
I also don't think the budget is what makes a good movie. I think you can make a great movie probably at any level. You just have to understand what your limitations are, and try to make up for them in every way that you can. I mean, most of the big directors made low budget movies at the starts of their careers. I think, and nowadays, I mean, it's the fact that you can now make a movie for literally a few $1,000s, of whatever quality. But the fact is that I like that it's become more of a level playing field like that. I like the fact that people who would never, 20 years ago, there would never be a chance they get anywhere near making their own movie, have that opportunity now.
Yeah. Monkey Man Alex, do you have any questions? Because I feel like Maddie and I are still on the show.
He ate a monkey, he's an ape, all right? Show respect.
Okay, sorry. Mr. 8-Man Alex Hauck. Do you have any questions? Because I feel like Maddie and I are stealing all the questions over here.
I'm just enjoying the conversation. I mean, the fact is, it's true, as you guys all have been talking about, trying to create film, especially like any art form, is extremely, taxing, but also the most rewarding thing that you can do, because you are bringing out like a part of, like, not to be too sentimental, but a part of your soul, into what you're making. And unfortunately, when you're trying to do that, you'll have a lot of other people who are just, looking for the end result, which is, how much money can I make off of this? What can I get out of this, instead of the love of actually creating and telling a story.
I know, and that can be a blessing and a curse, because I mean, the fact is, I should have given up movie making a long time ago. I mean, like I told you, Tom and I worked together and kept trying to mount new projects for years. It would have helped if we had felt Spookies turned out well and that we could use it as something to stand on at the time. But both of us realized at a certain point that we didn't just want to make movies. It's like this was like central to our mindset, and this is, I would find myself, and Tom, the same thing with him. We would start coming up with ideas or start writing something, and we couldn't stop ourselves. It was just like, oh, I got an idea. And Tom would do this all the time. He'd call me up and say, oh, I got a great idea, but you can have it. I'll never get to it.
I always refer to it as the pilot, that creative pilot, that fire, that furnace that's from within, that inspires the creativity. And I think, to have, to work, in this industry for a while, I mean, you'll have your hills and valleys, but, I think when that flame goes out, then it's like you might as well walk away from the industry.
Well, I mean, to be honest, we got to a point where we just said, all right, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this? And Tom was like, well, if I spent time and worked at it, I probably could have become a very good commercial artist, because he was a very good artist. He was he could draw, paint, sculpt, all these things. But he said, but the filmmaking was what I really wanted to do, and that sort of got in the way of almost anything else. And because so many projects just never wind up getting made, he resigned himself to that, and so did I, to just realizing that, all right, we may just continue doing this. We may get another shot to do another film. We may never get a shot to do another film, but we couldn't stop. We at one time had a serious discussion about whether or not we should get lobotomies and just put an end to everything. It would have worked, I think.
It's not a bad idea. Yeah, I feel you.
I think Matt already got one.
I think wearing that mask a little too long is giving you a lobotomy, dude.
That's true.
Or maybe we would have gotten our lobotomies, and then somebody would have come along and said, finally, you figured it out. This is how you crack Hollywood.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, now we have the money. And it's like the day after. And it's like, time is so bizarre how timing works, on projects where if you held on for just a little bit longer, the funds would be there, and then you turn your back, and it's like, but it's just, the whole, frustration.
I mean, we came to the point where we just realized it was not like we were going to stop having these thoughts of doing things or creating certain things. I mean, and this happens to me all the time anyway. I mean, I'm just, an idea comes into my head. Suddenly I'm writing something in my head as I'm just walking down the street, and it can't be stopped. It's just spontaneous. I'm not trying to make it happen. It happens.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. You can capture that lightning image or whatever it is that
it is, and but it's also tremendously frustrating in that you want to communicate this to other people. I see stuff in my mind and I think, oh wow, I would be delighted if I saw a movie with this in it, and I think anybody who saw what I have in my head would be delighted, but getting it out of my head and onto the screen is another story.
Right. It's true. I feel that. That's how I feel. Wow.
And I'm a big believer in entertainment value. I feel like, I look back when I was making student films, and I got a sense of audiences reacting as I wanted to certain things I did. I just realized that the best thing you can do probably is to entertain people. That's what they'll really be grateful to you for.
I think I agree with you. I mean, storytelling, entertaining. I mean, I think we get into this business because we want to entertain. And whether if you're just talking in front of an audience, I just this past weekend, I actually just did a one-man show at a horror convention, basically talking over my 20 years in the special makeup effects industry.
Right.
And it's not too dissimilar from like that versus something I finished, something I'm working on. You see it with an audience because as far as I'm concerned, I'm the worst theater goer in the world, especially if it's something I'm affiliated with. I'm pacing back and forth. I'm smoking like a maniac, Pepto-Bismol on one hand. But if people are entertained and they enjoy it, then it feels like, whew, okay.
Oh, exactly. You can just relax.
The goal has been achieved.
You can relax and let yourself be part of the audience experience.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really hard to enjoy it because I want others to enjoy it. And like a special makeup effect, if it's something that I did, it's like, let me know when it's coming up, pacing back and forth, come back in. I'm not watching the movie. I'm watching the audience because you want to see what their response is. And I think that's more important sometimes than anything else.
Yeah.
Ultimately it is. I mean, to tell the truth, ultimately an actual audience reaction means more than any review. It means more than anybody's opinion. It's like it's there. It's a demonstration of what you actually accomplish.
No.
I mean, it's so hard because I think for special makeup, I remember I did a short film at the Boston Underground Film Festival, and it was some rather disgusting effects that I did. And then afterwards, people were literally running to the bathroom because they were getting physically ill. And to me, I think that sense of doing that, it's better than winning any award because you've impacted someone, even though they might be displacing, whatever, but
might be in a negative way that's hurting their body, but you impacted them.
You can make someone laugh, if you can make someone puke, if you can make someone feel, then that's
it.
Kind of the objective.
Feel anything, you know what I mean?
No, it's true. It's one of the things I feel is the thing I miss most in terms of seeing movies in theaters with audiences. And it's my two favorite genres are comedy and horror, and they both usually get the most reaction from an audience, and that to me is a big deal. Just getting, I mean, that's you can sit there and watch a great drama or any other many other types of films, and the audience may never actually react audibly, or you have no idea exactly how they're taking it. But with a comedy or a horror film, as the film is in operation, how they're reacting.
It's almost like a concert. You're providing the and you want to see what the reaction is. And if people are standing, I can't believe this shit, or just whatever, to get that reaction. I mean, it's instantaneous. It's like theater, because it's right there. But for a movie, you might take maybe a year, and then you get it in front of the camera, and then you can see the reactions.
Yeah.
It's like HoRRoRWEEN. You know what I mean? It's like HoRRoRWEEN. I want to ask you the HoRRoRWEEN question real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Kid, do you have any most memorable costumes that you wore?
I can't say that I necessarily, because to tell the truth, I would usually, I mean, when I was a little kid, I used to go with the Ben Cooper Halloween costumes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then when I got older, I would like make stuff myself. I went out as a teenage Frankenstein once.
Nice.
You know, but I also feel like it's like, it was interesting because I think when you're at a certain age and you're very young and you're getting candy and stuff, and it's, oh, wow, this is so much fun. This is great. And then at a certain age, as I started to get older, I sort of started to think, wow, this is really like legalized robbery. We go to people and they give us this stuff, and I come home with a big bag of candy. And this is one of the things I was going to ask you guys about, because I don't even know to what extent that kind of thing even exists anymore. I know for years, I mean, the whole thing with kids being endangered and parents being unwilling to let them go out, and Halloween became greatly reduced from what it was when kids were just like allowed to run rampant on the streets Halloween night all over the place.
For sure.
And to tell the truth, I live in a small town now. I live about 12,000 people. And I thought when I came here, well, surely the kids here must be trick-or-treating. It's so safe and it's so rural. I haven't seen any kids on Halloween.
Yeah, we got a lot of places have curfews, which I know is kind of a bummer on it. And then, yeah, like I said, it was kind of slowly, because of like all the craziness of the world, was kind of slowly going down. When COVID came in, I think COVID almost like was the death blow to how trick-or-treating. I don't see anybody doing it. Every now and like,
I mean, I know parents now will do like kids parties and you know, schools will do events, but there was this sense of like wild freedom on Halloween night when you'd be out there and there'd be kids dressed up all over the place and everybody's got a big bucket or a bag, and you know, and some people give out great candy.
They do.
Oh, they do. And you know, to jump on what you're saying, I mean, as a product of the early 80s, I love the fact when I was younger, you know, where you could, you know, walk around, you know, you trick or treat. And but Maddie, I think you're right. I mean,
nowadays,
it definitely has changed where I'm noticing where I live in Dorchester, where the new kids in the block are from. You know, a lot of houses, I think, basically kind of or like in the cul-de-sac areas in the South Shore, it's like they might make like a little neighborhood, you know, thing out of it where you don't see so much actual, you know, ringing doorbells, you know.
Right.
There's a new thing called trunk or treating. It's where people gather in like churches and other parking lots, and people just kind of have kids
go to their different cars
back in their car, and then the kids walk down a line, and every like 3 feet they're getting more candy, and they walk through it and walk around, and by the end of it, they get a full bag of candy. But,
I mean, it may have the same end result, but that's like a bread line. I mean,
really, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and to me, as I said, what I think I really liked about Halloween, aside from all the candy, was simply this sense of wild freedom.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I don't think that's there anymore. I don't think that, you know, going out with a small group of friends and kind of, you know, walking through the cemetery, getting some candy, doing, you know, crazy.
And I think famously the night before Halloween was supposed to be mischief night.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that goes like right in hand. It's like, you know, we're going around extorting people for candy, but before that, we're gonna fuck them up.
Yeah.
All Hallows Eve. You know, you're right. Almost like that, you know, toilet papering, you know, houses, you know, almost happen like usually the day before, you know, and then they're dealing with the ramifications. Like, all right, we need to get the house ready to, you know, hand out candy.
Yeah.
Eggs, the bologna. The bologna on the car, I don't know if that was a trick-or-treat thing or just a, you know, mean thing. I don't know. I remember hearing about that.
I think that's more vindictive to actually fuck up someone's paint job with a piece of bologna than
I don't recommend
throwing an egg at someone.
Even
destroying. Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, I remember all kinds of pranks, but people rarely did anything like that was serious vandalism or
yeah, I mean, you know, the good old days when you could throw a roll of toilet paper and you know how easy it is to clean up, you know, but some people are rather extreme, you know, and it just, I don't get the meanness. I don't get the vindictive nature. I mean, I like when it's the goofiness, the fun of it, making other people laugh instead of trying to cause some sort of a impact, I guess you would say, than anything else. Because it's that socialization that, you know, makes it, you know, fun.
Right. Well, I mean, there are kids of a certain age, you know, who there's a certain age where you go out and you do things that are questionable, like vandalism or shit, where you're just sort of finding your way in life.
No, I wasn't one of those kids. I mean, by high school,
Bill.
you know, I
Sure
like.
you are, Bill.
No, seriously, I wasn't. I mean, I was one of those kids that would rather walk around the cemetery smoking a joint, you know, and just, you know, having fun rather than, you know, ringing doorbells.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of years after I started to stop trick or treating, I also found that was the way to go.
Billy, you should have an animated cartoon about you trick or treating on Halloween, on HoRRoRWEEN.
Maybe a claymation. We'll figure it out. You want to finance it? I'm looking for a financier.
Well, gee, unfortunately, so am I.
Yeah, exactly. Man,
everybody is. Even the apes looking for money.
Well, I mean, and plus, even like to try to, you know, raise funds yourself, you know, can be such a daunting task. And but you know, it's wonderful with the invention now of like Indiegogos and, you know, crowdfunding, because you know, it's changed up the game so much than trying to.
I've only said a little bit here or there about the Spooky sequel, and I've been frequently asked, "Are you going to crowdfund it?" And I would do that as a last resort. That's not my first go-to. I feel like, all right, I'm suddenly in a position where this film I made has some reputation that it didn't have previously, so I should be able to just go to certain people, especially companies, film distribution companies, etc., and say, "All right, I'm the guy that made Spookies, and here's what we want to do." And you know, and I'm talking to Vinegar Syndrome about it. I'm hoping they can be involved in one way or another because they're starting to do production.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean,
yeah,
they're a really good company, you know, on many different levels.
They've really done. You know, they were in competition with other companies like Arrow and a few
Shell Factory, Arrow.
I feel like Vinegar Syndrome. I mean, I don't know what happened exactly, but they suddenly started branching off. They're doing publishing. They want to do a Spookies comic book.
Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to like get into as many aspects.
Do they make an LP of Spookies?
Oh yeah, there's a vinyl record.
Yeah,
I've been trying to get my hands on one of those for a while.
Go on. I mean, it's out there. It's not hard.
Yeah, I know it's out there.
Man,
yeah.
It was issued by one company, and then it got reissued again by another company.
Okay.
I think Bull Moose had it last time we were up there, actually.
Yeah, Bull Moose is one of the stores up here that has wonderful physical media, you know, Blu-ray, DVD, you know, and it's like, as we mentioned earlier, it's wonderful that, you know, there's still businesses, you know, that are, you know, generating, you know, that type of content and product that people can actually.
I'll be curious to see what happens with these new Netflix stores. I mean,
that's weird. Yeah,
I'm sure there's going to be some like weird attempt to try and recreate like the feel of an '80s video business, but at the same time, I mean, you know, are people going to respond to that? Are enough people going to respond to that?
It's like, it's almost like Blockbuster versus the mom and pop stores, you know, because the Blockbuster would have, you know, 50 million copies of like the movie that just came out, and they might not have whatever, you know, certain smaller titles, but the mom and pop stores really went out of the way because they were just getting these amazing bulk.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel in terms of what is available to see, I feel like we're in a golden age in terms of I mean, almost anything that was ever made that exists, somebody wants to get it out there and be able to sell it to the public.
So there was the VHS, mom and pop VHS. Then we had like Blockbuster came in. Netflix originally killed Blockbuster, right? That was the deal. And then
they were like a rental thing, almost like a Redbox, I think.
They'd mail it to you. They'd mail you.
I was like big into Netflix for years because I mean, they had like almost everything you could want, and you know, and I would always do a quick turnaround, so I was seeing lots of movies.
Yeah, then Redbox kind of came in and I assumed was doing a little hurt, because there was a time when Netflix was kind of in a questionable place before they kind of went into the streaming thing.
Right, yeah, that's, you know, because the business was like sort of going up and down, and people, I think there was a period before streaming really happened where because nobody knew when that would become the next big thing, that companies were uncertain where to place their bets.
I mean, I can't even think of a world without Netflix right now. When you think about it, it's become such a big part of.
I'm just amazed that they became such a big producer of movies.
Yeah, but that's where they'll all go there. You know what I mean? Hulu does that. You know, Peacock does that. Even like Vinegar Syndrome going in that direction. Yeah, eventually.
I think that ultimately that's better. I mean, keep in mind that back in the late '40s, the government changed the laws, and the movie companies who previously owned a lot of the movie theaters would distribute their own theaters couldn't own theaters and produce movies. So that
it was rare.
The whole balance of everything changed.
Only one person I can think of who was making movies that had their own theater. Fascinating figure, Bob Lippers. And
is he in the Mob?
Well,
Bob Gilbert.
He may have well been, but I mean, here's a guy who owned like a theater, but he also was a filmmaker, and he wanted to get his movies out there, and so he was making movies and playing them in his own theaters. And there weren't many people in that position, and then he went on to help with Amicus Films, start over to Hammer Horror. I mean, he's a very fascinating figure in the horror spectrum. And Robert Lippers, if you're not familiar with that name, I would definitely say he was Roger Corman before Roger Corman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like it was Roger Corman, Lloyd Kaufman, James Balsamo.
Our buddy Balsamo.
I should say that I got contacted by James I don't know, close to a year ago, actually. He's very interested in being involved with the Spooky sequel. I'm in one of his movies, his upcoming movies, Robot Dracula.
Hell yeah. Jimmy's dude, yeah.
And I really liked him. And he, I mean, as soon as we get some business and legal things taken care of, I want to bring him into the fundraising effort. And I admire what he's done. And he and a few other people I've met, you must know of Dustin Ferguson.
Oh, I know Dustin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great guy.
And they'll even admit, yeah, my movies are like incredibly cheap and they're not the best movies, but they make money and I make a living and I have fans, and that's a lot to boast of.
Yeah. No, for sure. I always say
the hardest part is making the living. That's something a lot.
The hardest part. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we dream just to make movies for a living and get paid. But, I also work in construction by day, and, I make movies on the weekends. And some people feel like, oh, that's your hobby. It's like, no, that's my passion.
Right.
So, and I think some people don't understand that. And
it's what you're doing, the hard work that the world at large will pay you for to do the thing that matters to them. I mean, a lot of people certainly do that.
Yeah.
And in some situations, it's like, and the goal is always, well, I'll eventually do what I want for a living. But that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
But if you really feel the passion and you have to do it, you're going to do it no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, you'll always, have that zest, you never lose of that creative thing. And if you really want it, then you're going to figure out a way to make it, happen.
Yeah. And I'm impressed by guys like Dustin and James in terms of like they've managed to put together businesses that can continually do this kind of stuff. And there's a few other companies like that are doing that. What's his name? Mark Polonia. Do you know who he is?
I've heard the name.
Yeah. He has a company. He and I think his brother have a company that do lots of micro budget stuff. In fact, they came up to this area a while back and contacted me to talk about maybe making a film for them. And the fact is, I'm not really interested in making a $3,000 film. I don't think it's going to satisfy me creatively or pay me very much.
It's got to be a passion project if you're making it for.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you got to be fueled by love for it. Yeah.
Trying to think of those brothers.
And I have a couple of small projects that I also am putting together simultaneous with putting together plans for the Spookies sequel. So, I mean, I think at all kinds of different levels. I mean, just like my partner, Tom, used to basically, try to come up with ideas that would cost as little as possible. He once shot part of a movie where about 10 minutes of it took place during a blackout. So
creative.
Literally darkness.
Yeah, the darkness on darkness. Wow. The Mahal brothers, I think.
Alex works with the Mahal brothers a lot, I think.
Yeah, but those guys fundraise their own movies. They make their own product.
Yeah, and I've got fans all the time asking me to be part of their micro budget movie, which I'm glad to do.
You like doing cameos? You like doing cameos? And
I'm in James Balsamo's Robot Dracula in a scene with Malcolm McDowell.
Very cool.
Oh yeah.
Right? And that's basically, which means I shot a reaction shot and said some dialogue as he instructed for a scene for a shot that will be cut in. But the moment he said you'll be in a scene with Malcolm McDowell, I said, of course I'll do it.
That's classic. Yeah, I think I think everybody on this on these 4 screens have been in a James Balsamo picture.
Yeah, and to tell the truth, I've only seen a couple of his films, but I was pretty
They're
impressed
fun.
with.
They're a lot of fun.
He makes a real effort to be entertaining. It's not like he's
Absolutely.
It's not like he's trying to make a much more expensive movie for a very small budget. It's more like he's making a movie of the sort that you probably wouldn't spend more money on than this.
Yeah, but I love that P.T. Barnum element that he has. I mean, he's a real showman when he goes to these conventions. And it's been like close to 10 years, I think, since we worked with him. And
right.
So, I mean,
he's one of the best people with fans for sure.
Yeah. And it was fun because we made a movie called Groundhog with him. And I remember we were talking, we got so animated, and we started talking about Gremlins 2 and the whole power ties. And in that scene basically came out, and he's like, "Don't touch my power tie."
Yeah.
And so it's funny seeing, how things can evolve, I get on set, where you see, how actors do their thing, especially when they're entertainers, and Balsamo was definitely cut from that cloth.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've seen, I'm on his Facebook. I see his posts, and he makes a point of every photograph that's taken of him. He's got this big, beaming, smiling, wide-eyed face.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'll tell you something. I discovered, and I think I know part of the reason he does that. It's the same reason, if you've ever noticed, and this only started in the past 10 years, every time there's a picture of Kevin Smith, his eyes are like as wide as you can imagine them being, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
No, I totally.
I think he did that because I found out that after having done enough podcasts, having, had pictures taken, etc., that my eyes seem like they're half closed so much of the time that if somebody's got a camera on me, I better have my eyes open.
Yeah.
Alex took a picture of me over the weekend, and I've gotten over 75, likes and everything. I look like I'm half asleep and I'm holding a boom. And part of me feels like I wish I opened my eyes a little more. But sometimes when you're out there, if you have that animatedness, in that look, I mean, kind of the first person I noticed to do that maybe about 20, 30 years ago, as we talked about him, ridiculous as he is Lloyd, where he's just kind of like this wackiness that he likes to emulate.
Right.
But, if you're taking a picture, then it's a still. So you might not get that. But, it's I think it's interesting how certain filmmakers will almost try to own something, try to put a little stamp on something about how they might look, putting themselves out there. Or
worked with Lloyd a lot. He came up through trauma, you know what I mean? I think there's definitely a bit of Lloyd in him, you know what I mean, for sure.
Well, I think Balsamo definitely kind of grabbed some of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, what happened with Lloyd is that trauma became sort of like an institution in itself, and people, and there was the trauma style, and people related to that, and it was only after a certain number of years that he started to come out and become more of a public personality. Back in the 80s, and I don't know when that began, but I mean, he was really more the guy the guy behind the producing end of things at Troma. He wasn't really directing and making films until gradually that's something he also became known for.
You can definitely look at old videos with Lloyd too, and there's a point in the 90s when he kind of really became animated, probably around the cartoon time, you know what I mean? But there's a Morton Downey Jr. interview with him that's really famous where he's just getting a bunch of shit, but he's just he's not zany. He's not a zany Lloyd. He's very I think that only kind of kicked off in the 90s, probably maybe more the more he was put in front of a camera, he knew he had to ham it up.
I think he just realized how much fun it would be to just sort of let go and
ham it up, have fun with it.
That's why it's Uncle Lloyd. I mean, you look at Michael Hers, who I've met Michael Hers. We went there years ago, and I met Michael Hers, and he's just like a normal dude. But Lloyd definitely turns it, cranks it up. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I'm surprised Charlie Band never got a real trademark, kind of picture thing. Because to me, he was all about dude, dude, because he was just the guy that was always saying, I got this mega idea, it's going to be amazing. And I always thought like he didn't, kind of, but
Well,
Lloyd has his thing.
He's still going strong. He's still he's coming out. And he's a guy, and he sort of for a couple of years, he seemed to be inactive, and then he came back as strong as ever.
Yeah, because I remember when he was doing his road show when he was in that lull, and this is before streaming. Paramount, I think, dropped the deal with him, unfortunately, and he had to try to figure out how to maintain. But streaming has definitely been beneficial for Full Moon and Trauma, and these other folks that have this content body of work that they can show through their sites.
Yeah, well, my goodness. Well, Frank, we all appreciate you coming on. I feel like we've kept you for like 4 hours here.
Well, actually, you've kept me for about 3 hours, and it's probably almost 3 hours. But it's one of the longer podcasts that I've done. But I've had a good time. So fun.
We appreciate that. We're having a lot of fun with you. You know what I mean? But
and look, as I said, I'm hoping to get the ball really rolling on looking for funding for the Spookies follow up. And I may have mentioned this when I talked to you guys previously, but I'm looking to bring fans into it in whatever way I can. I've got so many.
I mean, I would love to contribute.
Love to be a part. Yeah, we all do.
That's it. I would like to have as many people on a crew that were just fans of the genre, that knew my movies if possible. I just feel it would put everybody on the same page and really just focus things.
For sure. I'd love to. I'm sure all three of us would love to be a part of it. Even the ape. Get the ape in there. Ape's got his own podcast.
Well, I needed it
to come out with Cher.
Alex, you ever going to show Frank your face, considering you're also an actor?
His face. Yeah.
I'm staring him without the mask.
Hey, we all.
I gotta say, I commit to a part. I committed to putting the mask.
You do, but look at that handsome man. You shaved. I'm happy.
Just rolled for the big ending.
That mask probably would have gotten a lot hotter with a beard.
Yeah, he's bearded up. Well, fantastic. You know what I mean? Here we are.
Well, thanks for having me. Give me some clue when you're going to put this up. So
this will be airing Halloween night. Right now, as we speak on this video, it's Halloween night. Yeah.
Where is most of your stuff?
On BoomBastic Media, YouTube.
Okay. Can you send me a link?
I sure will. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I had fun, and have me back again soon. And keep an eye. I'll be posting about progress with the Spookies follow up very soon. I'm it's weird because I have had people tell me, oh, there's no doubt you'll be able to get money for a Spookies sequel, and I sort of feel that way. But at the same time, I'm so cynical. I'm so used to being sidetracked and turned down and having doors slammed in my face. I'm just very cautious. Even just before this interview, I got a sudden message on Facebook saying, Frank, do you know where we can talk to somebody about getting the rights to make a Spooky sequel? And I said, well, maybe you should talk to me first.
Yeah. But we'd love to promote it and help out with it any way we can, man. That'd be great. I'd love to see it.
Put it this way, you got 3 people to help you out.
The reason I feel compelled to bring fans into it is that they helped to turn things around for me, just in terms of how I felt about the whole experience and what's happened since. And I'm very grateful for that. And I've expressed that frequently. But I also, as I said, to be able to do a project where everybody's just sort of pulling for the project to begin with, instead of walking in just because somebody decided to give them a movie job. I would love to be in a work situation like that.
It's wonderful when it's made for the fans and made by the fans, because
my goal with the film is I just want to make the fans happier than they can believe.
Yeah.
And I'm aiming really high, and I admit that. I'm trying to make a film that's going to make up for every movie I didn't get to make in the past 20 or more years.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I definitely want to be in contact. I'd love to contribute like a special makeup.
Yeah, look, please, any of you, feel free to contact me. I'm always pretty open to that. I'm just, I need a full staff, and I wish I had one, but I hope to have one sometime in the near future. So I've got a partner who's working with me. I've got a few other people who want to, who have talked about coming in already. I'm incredibly optimistic. I feel I feel the enthusiasm that I had at 19. So, when I first started doing film stuff.
Well, if you need over 200 feet of intestines, right here.
There you go. He'll cut it out of himself personally.
Really? Well,
made it for these guys.
I was going to start this hot dog business.
There you go. Perfection. All right. Well, Frank, you have a great
guys. Thank you so much, and I good luck to all of you, and hopefully we'll talk.
We'll definitely be in touch again. We'll have you back on, and we'll talk about the Spookies too, getting some,
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Frank, for your time.
Thank you so much.
Take care, guys.
You too. Have a good night. Bye. And ladies and gentlemen, the great Frank Farel has left the building. Frank is a great dude. Always a pleasure. We had him on the BoomBastic's, I think, in season 1. I think, the season.
Yeah, well,
with guests 3 maybe.
Yeah, the first season with guests. I mean, technically, I think that was it was season
maybe 3 or 4.
Season 3 was the first time we had guests.
Yeah, always a pleasure. See, we started late. We didn't want to rush into things. We were wait till we were mature as a podcast.
We're still recording.
Yeah, we're still recording, Bill. You shouldn't take that piss. You shouldn't take the pinochle out.
The pinochle is for after hours.
Oh my! Oh my! Well, Billy, thanks for joining us. We got the film going on right now, so we did it this weekend. We got next weekend. We're doing it. We break it into weekends because we're cool like that. And Doogie, we wanted to bring y'all a little something. Maybe there might be a taste. It's a little early in the game. Maybe the editor might show something. Who knows these things? Nobody ever knows for sure.
Who's editing this?
I don't know, but Buddy Buttafuoco's directing this episode, so we'll talk to him about it. But yeah, so we got we got a new horror flick out on the horizon coming your way. Everything's coming together really nice. Looking beautiful, sounding great. So it's been a little bit since we did a feature. You know what I mean? It's been pushing down on sometimes, but jumping back into it, it's like taking like a duck to water, riding a bike. You know what I mean? Got a great
check out this newest BoomBastic venture coming at you.
Hi. So there's your trick or treat for the evening. You know what I mean? Anybody want to say anything in closing to the folks at home that might be listening?
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween. More like Happy HoRRoRWEEN up in this mo trucker.
Happy HoRRoRWEEN.
In this HoRRoRWEEN's movie, ladies and gentlemen, Spookies. Why? That's
a little closer towards you. There you go.
There it is. There's Spookies.
You got the glorious VHS and of course the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray, which was released. Check it out on Amazon. I believe you can get your hands on this for like $21, $22. I think it goes up and down, but check it every couple of days if you want to catch the.
Keep in mind, an award-winning title. Is that Rondo winner, The Unmaking of Spookies, just as amazing as the movie itself.
It's on there.
I can't say enough good things about that Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray. You owe it to yourself to get that Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray.
And get the VHS of the 1986 Delirium Awards. Winner of the Delirium Awards. Ladies and gentlemen, we always love you. Thanks for listening. We hope you have a happy and safe HoRRoRWEEN this year. We'll catch y'all on the next episode of BoomBastic's, as well as the Christmas episode popping off in a couple months. Thankful for y'all. Billy, always a pleasure. Alexander.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime, Alexander. Always a pleasure.
And all I have to say is sometimes you never know what you're going to get in your bag on HoRRoRWEEN.
Oh, yeah. See y'all next HoRRoRWEEN. Don't let the ghouls get you, or the spookies neither. Happy HoRRoRWEEN.